Everyone ready? Hello everyone, welcome to tonight's Scrutiny meeting and the last one of the municipal year. We'll start with a round of introductions. My name's Councillor Fiona Hornby. I'm the ward member for Gorse Hill where we are today, and I'm also the chair of Scrutiny Committee, and I'll pass on to my co-chair.
Thank you. Councillor John Holden, Councillor for Manor Ward and Vice Chair of this committee.
Councillor Will Jones, a councillor for Brooklands Ward and a member of this committee.
Councillor David Jarman, I'm councillor for Longford Ward.
Kelly Glenton, councillor for Manor Ward.
Councillor Francis Cosby, representing Buckley St Martins.
Councillor Jill Axford, Lostock and Barton Ward councillor.
Geraldine Coggins, Green Party councillor for Altrincham.
Councillor Will Frasford, Timpley North.
Councillor Ben Hartley, Ashton-on-Mersey Ward.
Councillor Simon Thomas, Flixton Ward.
Keith Harris, Traffic and Transportation Principal Engineer, One Trafford Partnership.
Les Dagnall, Project Director for the One Partnership, Amy.
Sean Ryan Johnson, Asset Management Engineer, One Trafford Partnership.
John Stevens, Contract Manager of Street Cleansing and Grounds Maintenance, Client, Traffic Council.
Andy Haig, I'm the Highways Manager at Trafford Council.
James Lomax, Head of Highways and Transport, Trafford Council.
Councillor Steve Adshead, Executive Member for Highways, Environmental and Trading Services, and Councillor for Stretford Humphrey Park Ward.
Chris Morris, I'm Highways, Transportation and Environment Director for Trafford Council.
Good evening, I'm Amal Pass, Head of Legal and Governance and the Council's Deputy Monitoring Officer.
And I'm Harry Callaghan, the Senior Democratic Officer for this committee.
Thank you very much for your attendance tonight, everybody. Is there anyone who has any apologies? I have one apology from Councillor Denise Weston.
Also received apologies from Councillor Butt.
Any more? No, fab. We'll move on to the minutes from the last meeting. I know there's already one thing that someone wants to raise, so I'll let Councillor Frass go first, and if there's anything else, we'll come to that in due course.
Yeah, I don't want to dwell on it. I think I've already emailed Harry. I think you said it was a gap in the recording or something, and you had to go and fix the machine. So there's basically a whole block where we were quizzing the housing associations on damp and mould, and I think it was my point on how much long-term work was outstanding, and that was obviously quite a serious block of responses we received from everyone present. Harry and I have already discussed that I might send you my notes as they were, because I could see you had the same as me above and below, but you didn't have the bit there. Is that okay with the committee if I just, and we leave it to Harry's discretion to just add something to reflect that missing block of questions?
Yeah, we'll bring it back to the next scrutiny meeting.
Yeah, more than happy to bring it back. As I said in the email, apologies for it was the exact moment I got a text saying the stream's not working properly, so I had to jump out. But we'll work together to get the responses in.
Thank you.
Is there anything else that people spotted as missing from those minutes? No? Okay, we'll bring them back in July. Has anyone got any declarations that they'd like to make? No? Any questions from the public?
None have been received.
No. As always, please encourage people to send in questions. Just to iron out any confusion, Harry has sent round a bit of a switch around that we had with the agenda. As we have our head of legal and governance here tonight, and their section's very small, so we decided to move that to the top so that they could get away when we start on all our highways questioning. So yeah, just to explain that, the agenda item 5 will now be standards committee role and remit. Is everyone happy to take this question, this section as read and move to questions? Great. Fab. Would you like to just quickly reintroduce yourself, Emma, and then we'll go on to any questions?
Yes, certainly. So my name's Emma Malpass, Head of Legal and Governance and the Deputy Monitoring Officer. Happy to take any questions in relation to the report that is before you this evening. It was approved by the Standards Committee last week, and in terms of next steps, the proposals will be considered by the Executive in April for recommendation to full Council. So I'm just here this evening to invite any feedback that you might have.
Thank you very much, Emma. I've got Councillor Axford first, and I'll note Councillor Coggins.
Yeah, I really welcome this expansion of its role. I think it's just really brilliant, especially looking at the Constitution and training accountability. And I just wondered how it would, as we've got the Member Development Steering Group, how would this kind of training agenda with the Standards Committee kind of liaise with that? And I was also wondering about what RIPA powers are. So I know there's two questions, I'm sorry, is that all right?
All right, I forgot to remind everyone, one question at a time, please.
I'm afraid I don't know the answer to your second question, so I will happily take that one away and come back to you and the committee outside of this meeting. The proposals, if they are accepted, will lead to the first meeting of the Standards Committee in the municipal year, very much looking at their annual work plan in the context of the new framework and the widened role and remit. So there is a framework there, but the actual annual work programme will very much be shaped by the committee itself with advice and support from officers. I hope that answers your question.
Councillor Coggins.
Yeah, it was just on the page, it's mentioned page 29, it's the last page of the report, or actually I think of the appendix. It's in the last page of Appendix 1. There's a missing bracket, which wasn't the main point after the list of parties. The chair of the members panel from the political party who have overall control of the council. So the chair is from the political party that has overall control. So I wondered what happens when we have no overall control, and that a constitutional document should have a provision for that. Presumably it means, maybe it means the largest, but it doesn't necessarily mean the largest party. I'm guessing that means the party that has the leader of the council. So this is the page 29 of the big document pack, the last page of Appendix 1. It's the second bullet point.
So it's reference to the chair of the members panel from the political party who have overall control of the council. That is a good question. That's certainly, again, something I will take away from here.
Thank you very much. Councillor Jones.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. First, as an observation, I very much welcome this. I had a good read through it last week. Could you kind of tell us how it came about and how it was worked up? And the question is, are these proposals that are going to the next meeting final, or can they be amended? Is this just a draft and there could be more changes to it?
The decision will be made by the Executive in April as to whether to recommend the proposals on to full Council. There is certainly scope for any observations to be fed through to the Executive to inform that decision making. And in relation to how the proposals have come about, it's formed a more sort of overarching review of a number of the Council's committees in terms of their roles, remits and their effectiveness. And Standards Committee, we all know, has a fundamental role to play in promoting and maintaining high standards of conduct across the committee. But it was very much felt that when you looked at the terms of reference, there was perhaps more that could be done in that space, particularly in relation to those sort of proactive pieces of work to raise people's awareness of conduct and to prevent misconduct from happening in the first place. It also, to a degree, ties in with a national consultation ongoing at the moment in relation to the conduct regime. So it felt like a good time to look at Standards Committee in that sort of context. So that's where these proposals have arisen from. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Hartley.
Thank you, Chair. I also welcome this paper and the proposals. I think as a former member of Standards Committee, it did feel like there wasn't a lot on the agenda. And so I think this sort of wider remit is really welcome. You know, particularly when we speak to people, trust in politicians is pretty low. So I think it's good to have the focus on standards and particularly our compliance with the principles on the 7 principles on public life. Actually, I could probably help with Councillor Axford. I think asked about REPA, which I think is the Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act, which well, I'm no expert, but I think it regulates investigatory powers of public authorities, which would include the council, I guess, in a way to make sure they're not exercised in an oppressive way. So my question was about the one of the rules for Standards Committee that's proposed is oversight of complaints handling and ombudsman investigations. And I wasn't clear on the ombudsman investigations, whether that would be an investigation by the ombudsman into standards, or would it be any investigation by the ombudsman into any complaint about council services that gets escalated to that level? Thank you.
Yes, it's the latter. The Ombudsman investigates complaints that haven't been resolved through the Council's internal complaints procedures. And the idea really behind that recommendation is to have oversight of the nature of complaints that are being made about what service, to identify any common themes and to see whether that in turn identifies room to strengthen awareness and practices and procedures in that area.
Councillor Holden.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I agree entirely with what people have been saying around the table. This is a very welcome document. I, for a very short period, was chair of Standards Committee back in the 2014-15 year. There was nothing like this at that time that I was aware of. Now, I know that my reputation is one who's not that keen on process, but I think I would have known if this existed, and I don't think it did. So it's a very, very welcome addition to our armoury and to our accountability. And just one other point, RIPA, I had to look it up because I never heard of it before. I don't know what it does, but I would agree it's about investigatory powers. So I'm assuming it means that we're not allowed to lock people in a room and beat them with socks full of sand or anything like that. That we have certain rules under RIPA that we should actually abide by. And it would be interesting if we could get some more detail of just where that comes. And I know you've undertaken to do that. Thank you.
Yes, apologies, I misheard and I heard IPA instead of RIPA or RIPA, so my apologies for that. But yes, echo the comments that have been made this evening. It is a piece of legislation that regulates the powers of public bodies to carry out surveillance and investigation, and to put that into sort of context that brings it to life. It's things like looking at people's Facebook pages, CCTV, if we suspect that there is a hotspot for fly tipping, if we were to surveil that area in any way, that would come under that piece of legislation as well. So as a council, we do have a responsibility to report annually on the circumstances in which we have exercised our powers under that legislation. And because it is far-reaching and it intrudes into people's private lives, that has to be properly authorised and a power that's properly used. So it's important that the use of those powers has a home which is proposed to be in the Standards Committee to make sure they are being used properly.
I just ask that we try and avoid using acronyms in documents, because it would have been useful. I mean, I could have looked it up, obviously, but I was kind of pointing out as well that we need to avoid acronyms. Thank you.
Absolutely right, and it's something that's been raised in Standards Committee itself, so something I will definitely be taking away.
Brilliant, thank you. Does anyone else have any more questions about that report? No, thank you for bringing that to us. We'll move on to item 6, as in the new agenda. So this will be Assets of Community Value panel. Is everyone again happy to take this as read? Great, we'll go straight to questions. Councillor Axford.
Yeah, I just wondered how quickly applications are being dealt with at the moment, and also how... I'm sorry, I have 2 questions. I can only ask one, can't I? Sorry.
Yes, one please, thank you.
I don't know the answer to that. There is a statutory timescale sitting behind the process by which applications should be determined, but I don't have the specific detail about what, if any, outstanding applications we have at the moment and the timelines in that respect.
They're all being completed within the statutory time, I imagine.
I don't know the answer to that, sorry.
Can I ask the other question now?
I'm going to go to Councillor Fast first because he's waiting. Yeah.
I don't mind if you want to... All right. Yeah, I just want to see how the committee feel about the paragraph on the conflict of interest. I'm not comfortable with that, actually. I think residents in Trafford elect councillors to have a view, and they expect them to be able to exercise it. I don't see that it's a conflict of interest for a ward member to actually champion something in their ward. Surely that's their role. That's the point of being a ward councillor, is to actually, support things in your ward. For better or worse, we don't elect people proportionally across the whole of Trafford or anything like that, whatever you think we should do. We have a system where each little part of Trafford elects somebody. The people living there expect them to be able to stand up for that area. Yet the very moment something in your patch comes up, you're not allowed to vote or even speak. You can't attend. I don't agree with that, and I would like to actually suggest that struck off.
Is it correct that they're not able to attend and make the voice heard, or is it just that they're not a core member and a voting member?
So yeah, this was subject to some discussion at Standards last week when ultimately the proposals were approved. It's absolutely true to say that panel members can't be ward members for the ward in which the ACV is located, so they wouldn't be able to vote on a decision, but they are very much involved in the consultation process when the council receives a nomination for an asset of community value. There is an exercise that is undertaken by officers, and as part of that there is consultation with a number of people, including ward members, and then those views are reflected in the report that the ACV panel consider when making their determination. So although Councillor Frass is correct that that ward member would not be able to vote on the application, their views and representations are very much fed into the process.
I have Councillor Holden.
Excuse me, I was equally uncomfortable with that line in 2.5 about the ward members. I can't think of any person on that committee, on that panel, that would know more about the situation than the ward members. For heaven's sake, someone actually lived there, as well as representing that area. And what I was interested in is where that suggestion came from. It didn't, I'm sure that it didn't just appear out of the, someone came up with that idea, and I'm hoping they came up with that idea for a very good reason, but I still disagree with it intensely.
Go on, Councillor Frass.
Yeah, okay, sorry, I thought I'd let the officer respond, then I'd come in, because if possible, that would be my recommendation. It sounds like I have someone who would at least second that view from this committee.
I don't know the origins of that rule, so can't speak to the rationale behind it. But I think given the strength of feeling, it's certainly something that can be reflected in the report that goes to the executive for them to consider when they're making a decision.
Just before we move on, is there anyone else who has a strong feeling around that exact same thing? Oh, quite a lot of people. Councillor Hart, you were up next anyway.
Thank you. I disagree with Councillor Frass and Councillor Holden. I think it is useful to have that in. I think it is a potential conflict of interest. We're not saying a ward member can't participate in that debate. They could write to the panel. They could attend the panel meeting. I don't know if they have a right to be heard at the panel meeting. They could make representations in favour or against an application for an asset to be listed as one of community value. But I suppose the analogy I can think of is planning committee. Now, a ward member is allowed to sit on the planning committee that considers a application in the ward that they represent. But on occasions, and I've done this myself, you may have a strong view about a planning application. You may want to speak in favour or against it, and in which case you recuse yourself from being a member of the committee and you speak either for or against that. And I think I've made an application for an asset to be listed as one of community value. It does happen quite quickly. In my experience, that was last summer. It probably took a couple of months. But there are legal requirements that need to be complied with for an asset to be considered one of community value. So there is an element of judgment and discretion, as there is with something like planning committee or licensing committee, but there are legal requirements to comply with. And I think, therefore, it's right that the members of that panel come to it with an open mind, that they receive legal advice or advice from the council as appropriate, and they make a decision according to what those legal requirements are, and bringing their knowledge of the borough as councillors. But I think it does create a potential conflict of interest if you are a ward councillor. You are likely to have a view on whether an asset should be listed as one of community value. So it's a little bit different, I think, from planning, because planning application for a household extension, you may not care, at all what the outcome of that is. But where you're dealing with an application that's significant, like whether to list something as an asset of community value, and the implications of that it imposes restrictions on the landowner to dispose of it in the way that they might wish so freely, I think it's right that members of that panel come to that decision fresh, and they're not influenced beforehand by feelings that they might have about the merits of that application. And I think you would have that if you're a ward councillor. So I would oppose Councillor Frass's proposal and Councillor Holden's proposal. And I'd be grateful if anyone agrees with me. If they
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
I think it's also important to know in what you said as well that you could be the applicant for that asset of community value if you're a ward member, or at least very involved in that application process. Emma, would you like to come back, or do you want more comments? More comments, okay. Councillor Jones.
Just on this, there's obviously a kind of difference of opinion on whether it should stay or be questioned. Do we need to go to a vote?
I think I've still got some comments from other people outstanding. I've got Councillor Axford, I've got Councillor Coggins. I would rather let everyone have the say. First, I've got you as well, don't I? Okay, I'll make put everyone on this. Yeah, I'd rather have everyone have the say first, and then we'll go to vote. Councillor Axford.
Sorry, it's not relevant to this bit.
Okay. Councillor Coggins.
That line jumped out at me too. I'm not sure. Clearly, there's a difference opinion. I don't think I'm strongly in either camp at the moment. I think I don't really see the disanalogy with planning that Councillor Hartley was referring to. It seems to me similar enough to planning or licensing that there might be a case where you have a conflict of interest and then you've got to recuse yourself, but it's not automatic, I think, for a ward representative. It also struck me that people don't always live in their wards, so you could be right across the road from something. Your house could be right across the road from something. We're not asking you in that case to recuse yourself. And then my final thought really is that there must be precedent on this from elsewhere. It feels like one of those questions people have been doing for several years up and down the country, and my preference would be to just find out some precedents from what's done elsewhere. I do need to come back on an unrelated point before we move on.
Okay, brilliant. Councillor Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. I'm very familiar in the same camp as Councillor Hartley, although what I would say is that I think it would be important that any ward that has an application or has any dealings with the community value panel should be included way before consultation, because I can think of 3 in the last 10 years in Flixton where it has occurred and not happened. So I'm a little bit sketchy around the consultation and local ward councillors being involved in that consultation, although I do agree that you could have a presupposed bias as a sitting member on the panel, and I agree you should be recused from it as a standard.
Thank you. Councillor Jarman, does your question relate to this? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I take it this is a new thing they're suggesting we bring in, or is it existing arrangement? Because I was on the Asset of Community Value panel about 5 years ago when we sat and considered, I think it was 5 different applications, and 2 of them were in my ward. And nobody said, oh, you can't have a view on this, or you can't discuss this, or even vote on it. And so I did, but I didn't feel conflicted. I thought I could be objective in my view, and I think probably ought to have more faith in members to be objective. As has been pointed out on planning and licensing, we make decisions which are in our ward, and we don't have to recluse ourselves. But I mean, if there is a reason to, as it has also been suggested, then that's fine. But ordinarily, if it's really nothing to do with us apart from being in our ward, I don't feel the need to. I don't think we need that sentence in, to be honest, at 2.5. That part of it. Thank you.
No worries. Councillor Cosby, do you want to come in?
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly come in. I think we need a bit more information on why that's in place until if we're going to be voting on whether or not it's removed. We're just discussing now and guessing the reasons why. So I think we need a lot more information to make a valued and fair judgment on whether or not we keep it in.
I think there's been a lot of discussion about this one point, hasn't there? And it does look like it needs some ironing out, and we're probably not going to come to a consensus now. So is everyone happy to move on from that point with the consideration that this is noted, and obviously it is going back to executive? Would everyone be happy with that? No. Right.
Paragraph 3.1 says we've approved it.
To be oh yeah, okay.
Sorry to be pedantic, but
Councillor Holden's just noted an error in the document that says that it's been approved. It's been considered and approved by this meeting.
paragraph 3.1.
3.1.
It was considered and approved by standards.
It says scrutiny as well.
It says we've approved it. Have we been working very hard not to? Otherwise.
It's on page 27. We'll leave that. It can just be removed. Okay, I've got. Is your point on this point still? Yeah. Okay, go on.
Yeah, Chair, just on that point, before we just kind of go over it, what are we noting on this?
The report generally.
But are we noting about the debate we're having about whether members are happy with being not able to speak on items or have to recuse themselves at the assets of community value? Are we making that point specifically, or
Is that correct, Harry? That we could add to our comments to the document.
Yes, so the report is here to be approved by the committee. However, obviously, it's clear the consensus isn't to approve it in its current form. So your options now, and I'll let Emma come in with how you want to move that forward, but Emma would take that away. And it depends whether you choose to have a vote on whether you're not agreeing with the recommendation or agreeing to put forward your own recommendation for the report. But I'll let Emma come in.
Chair, just can come on to that. I don't think there is a consensus. There's a view from certain members that we take it out. I think we need to be more clear.
We could have a vote on that now if you like. Yep. So let's have a vote on whether to keep it the same or whether to change it to. Go on.
I think we need to. I think what Francis was really relevant, that we really need some more clarity before we can vote on it. I don't feel like I'm in a position to vote on it at the moment.
Yeah. I think it'll have to just come back, won't it?
I think there's. Go on.
Sorry, yeah, I mean, this is a decision for the executive to make, and in relation to the proposed amendment of the terms of reference to recommend a decision to full council. The purpose of bringing both of the items to standards and yourselves is for additional layers of scrutiny. So I am absolutely happy to amend the report that will go to the executive to reflect the comments that have been made here today, or not specifically the comments, but that it wasn't possible for a consensus to be reached in relation to the conflict of interest point. If the chair decides to move to a vote this evening, then those who don't feel they have enough information to vote have the option to abstain. But ultimately, this is a decision for the executive and on to full council.
Councillor Fass would just like to come in again.
I'll make a tiny point. Just noting the way this works, if you are recused, somebody else from your party comes in. So if I understand that, you can swap out. That somewhat circumvents this because you just pick someone and tell them what to say, but they have to be from a different ward. So as I understand it, that would discriminate against possibly my colleagues, probably in the Green Party, your colleagues only a few years ago, before you'd broken a second ward. You wouldn't, am I correct in saying if one party only had a ward, like my own or Councillor Coggins here, they wouldn't be able to swap someone in? They just lose all their rights. I don't think that's fair.
That is correct, but I take you back to the point where ward members do have the opportunity to make representations and to say what they would like to say in relation to the application as part of the consultation process, and that information, representations and views of ward members are placed before the panel to inform that decision making.
Is your point on this point, Councillor Hartley?
Well, yeah, it's one more query on this decision actually, which is that I think if we're going to take that out, I don't think we should, but if we were to take that out, then my query would be, does that trigger a need to have some more guidance for members on when a conflict of interest might arise in relation to that panel? I can't remember, but I seem to think that for planning committee, there is a bit more guidance. There's certainly guidance given to members. Now, whether that's set out in the Constitution and the members' code of conduct, I'm not sure, but certainly when you have training for planning committee, you are part of that is recognising when you might have a conflict of interest. So my worry is that if the committee were minded to take that out, you know, we don't have any guidance then on when a conflict might arise.
I just got a bit more clarity. So if we did have a vote on whether to remove it or not, that wouldn't mean that it would be necessarily removed from the document. It would mean that that is recommended to the executive. We don't have the final say on like what is and what isn't removed from this document. I think it probably is best to just move to a vote. Is everyone happy with that?
If there was any other discussions on the item that people wanted to raise.
Was there any discussions on that specific item? I know there was a couple of other points on other items that I will come to. No? Okay, so we are voting on recommending that the executive keep the report as is. And if you say, basically, if you're voting yes, the report's staying the same. If you're voting no, we're taking it to remove, to recommend to remove the conflict of interest from ward members point. So, who would, sorry, I know, it's not easy.
It might be easier to do it to take the vote as as you want to remove it. So I'd take it as, the committee is recommending that we remove the line in 2.5 and then you vote in that way of it, just because you're voting then on what you're removing rather than...
That makes more sense. Right, so who would like to vote?
To remove. In favour of removing the...
Are you putting your hand up for a question or putting your hand up?
About this. On what we're voting on, because that sounds like we want to take out all reference to conflict of interest. What we're saying is that the conflict of interest isn't expressed
specifically to do with ward members.
So just saying that, saying we're voting to take out the bit about conflict of interest isn't really accurate. We're voting to say that that particular bullet point we think needs to be revised or reconsidered.
Yeah. So we're voting to whether to revise point 2.5 bullet point 1, 2, 3, 4, which is panel member cannot be the ward member for the ward in which the ACV is located to avoid any conflict of interest issues. And we're voting on recommending this to the executive that they consider removing that bullet point from this document. Who would like to vote? Yeah.
I think we can vote on that one. That's fine. But I also think we need to vote on whether we can just recommend that it's looked at again. That we, and we have some clarification around it. I think we need to have a vote on that rather than for or against, if you like.
We can still note a recommendation that it's looked at. The rationale. I think that's okay. Go on.
If we do that, do we still need to vote on, like, as a part of this committee, we need to vote whether we approve the full document or not? Is that what? Do we need to do that today?
I believe we're just noting it.
So can we note it and then just say, as an addition, we believe that this should be looked at, instead of saying that this is our formal recommendation as a committee? I just wonder if that's possible. Sorry, I know it looks a bit of a headache, but I just think it's important.
I think, I'm not sure if that's the most clear recommendation. Go on, Coggins.
Sorry, the document, it doesn't say it's for noting. The recommendations are that various elements of it be approved, so it is about approving, not noting.
Thank you. As it's already been said, this is for the exec to make a decision on, and we can look forward. I would also like to point out that this has been through a committee once and come to us from our Standards Committee. So our Standards Committee are all obviously happy with the wording and happy with the way that this has gone through. I appreciate that some members may not like the fact that as a ward member they be disbarred from making comment at a meeting or voting on this. But again, I point to the fact that the consultation is a point where the report will come forward and our members will make a decision on what is in that consultation, of which all 3 ward members of any particular ward have the opportunity to put their opinions forward as strongly as they wish. The fact that they won't be able to vote on something in their ward is irrespective, as we should be judging anything that we discuss on what is in the consultation.
Thank you. Go on, Councillor Hartley.
Yeah, I think Councillor Thomas makes a good point. Standards Committee have approved this, as I understand it, and we've just considered an item where we wanted to expand the role of Standards Committee, and we all, I think, acknowledge the important role the Standards Committee plays in upholding standards. And I think whether there's a conflict of interest in decision making at the council is more properly for Standards Committee. I appreciate the reports come to us to approve, but I am uncomfortable with us interfering in that and making recommending quite a significant change. The only other thing, Chair, is I think the proposal's right at 2.5. There are some other references to ward members, I think, in the draft terms of reference, etc. But I think we can just take it that the recommendation that's proposed is that all of that's removed.
So our role today was to approve that this moves to the executive. We're not approving the report as such, we're approving it to move to executive. So that's the decision we've got to make. We can make recommendations to the executive that they consider changes in it, but we're not here to actually make changes to that document or necessarily bring it back either. Does it go to the executive or not? So go on, Councillor Axford.
Our role of scrutiny is to actually scrutinise it, which is what we're doing. So, I mean, I don't think it's fair to say that we just let standards do what they want. You know, it is our purpose, our function here.
So, I suppose, right, so where we are, there's not a consensus on either of these points. So the two options, from what I can tell, are you would like it to, the 2 recommendations you can put forward is that you would like more clarity on where the recommendations come from and why it's included within the report. And then the second vote would be removing it or keeping it. You could make both of those recommendations. So you could make the recommendation, you could choose to have a vote on recommending to the executive, or the recommendation there would probably be to Dominique as the director to provide that clarity on why it was included. The second vote would then be on whether you choose to remove it, but obviously there's not a consensus on either of those things as it currently stands, as there is members who would keep it as it is. So it is tricky, I think, to understand quite how we vote on how as a committee you vote on both of those things. I think if you chose to ask for more clarity on it, it would then it could be provided outside of the meeting, but then if the committee were to vote on it again, it would have to come back to the committee. So I think, yeah, as a committee, you can choose, I suppose, on what you would like to vote.
Councillor Coggins.
Well, should we just have a vote as to whether one to vote for approving the report exactly as is or not? And our comments can still be fed on, so even if we approve it, we can still feed on the comments. But that would just get us out of this. We'll find out if the majority is just thinking it's absolutely fine as is, or if the majority is thinking, no, I'm not happy with some elements of it.
Yep, that's fine.
Yeah, let's do that. Yeah. Councillor Jones.
Sorry, I think the report will go to executive. I think what we are voting on is the point about having members recuse themselves if they have an item in a community value asset decision on that day. So I think we need to take the vote based on the 2 items that Harry's talked about, whether we want more clarification and the second bit is whether we want to recommend taking it out. So there's 2 votes you need to have, rather than that.
More clarification or not, and then
Yeah.
whether we take it out or leave it in.
Yeah, rather than voting on the whole report. So
Right, we're going to move to that. We're going to do it. Right. So, what's the first vote? More clarification. So, who would like to vote? So, does this mean we're not taking it to the executive if we're getting more clarification?
I suppose it would be that you feel you don't have enough information to make a recommendation to the executive.
So, would you, do you feel you have enough information to make a recommendation to the executive, or does it need to come back? So, do you have enough information to take this to the executive? It's a yes or a no. Yes? No. Okay. I didn't count. I think that was yes, wasn't it? Did you count? Okay. So, do we need to go to the next question as well?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because
Okay.
That first vote was just, are you happy with, you don't need any more clarity on why they came to that recommendation is what you've chosen to vote for.
Okay.
So now you're choosing whether to remove or not.
And then we have a second vote about point 2.5, bullet point 4. The removal of panel member cannot be the ward member for the ward in which the ACV is located to avoid any conflict of interest. So for that to be...
Sorry, point of order. We've just voted to recommend it goes through to committee. I can't see how we can recommend it
We
goes
didn't vote on that, Councillor Thomas. We voted on whether we needed more clarification or not.
So we've got no reason for it not going to exec. So that, to me, as a point of order, would be that we've just voted it through to go to exec. So now we're looking to, after making that recommendation, that we don't need more information for this to go to exec. We're now saying, but we do want to vote on whether or not we take that particular bullet point out. Apologies, but I think we've already made a decision that we're okay with it going to exec.
That wasn't really how it was positioned to the committee, though. So let's just have this vote, get it over with, yeah? So we are voting to consider removing point 2.5, bullet point 4. Who would like to remove this? Who would like to keep it the same?
So the chair's got the vote, so that the vote would be to keep it the same and approve that in its current form it's recommended to the executive.
Right. So in its current form, this is going to the executive, but it will be noted that we've had this discussion. Would you like to finish? Oh, sorry, we did have some other questions on the report anyway. Hopefully we won't have to have any more votes. So Councillor Axford.
It's okay, I don't need to ask a question now.
Councillor Coggins.
Yeah, it's not a question, it's an apology. My comments earlier were actually about this report. The no overall control bit is in this report, not the other report. Sorry, I enthusiastically scrolled through my notes to the wrong bit. So it's the end of Appendix 1 on this. It has a line about overall control and it needs a explanation of what happens when we're not in that situation. Apologies.
Thank you very much for coming tonight, Emma.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you for obliging me by putting me the first 2 items on the agenda.
Thank you. Right, and now on to highways. So we have decided to mark these points as read. We're not expecting a presentation from our colleagues today, as we had a very thorough presentation. Thank you very much for the 8+ sides to the committee. The detail was honestly much appreciated. It's been asked of me that we have this discussion in themes, kind of like we did for the housing one. I just wanted to run through the suggested themes and see if anyone's got anything they want to add. So prioritising a matrix was the first one. Highways and pavement condition, potholes, leaves and drainage. Are those themes okay with anyone? Can anyone see anything? Or do you just want to go without themes? No. Why don't we kick off with prioritisation and matrix as the first theme, and then no more themes after that? We'll just have general whatever questions we want. What, sorry? Safety.
Safety was one of the topics here.
That's the next agenda item.
That's the next agenda item. Yeah.
The presentation just that was received to us included both agenda items within it, so they are attached as noted on the report, on the agenda.
So let's just have specific questions about prioritisation and matrices, and then we'll have questions about anything else highways related. I think we'd have too many themes otherwise. Go on, Councillor Jones.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you for this very extensive presentation. But I did struggle with it a little bit. I'd just like to do a deeper dive into the matrix. For example, if you look at double yellow lines on highways, you've got a lot of headings in there, but I couldn't find any information on how that matrix is put together, how the scores put together, what are the weightings, how is a score calculated? Maybe you can please explain that for us, for the double yellow lines particularly. And can I ask this other point? In the interest of transparency, is it possible to have a snapshot of the list of outstanding items which are calculated for a particular matrix, for example, double yellow lines, perhaps on a 6-monthly basis? Thank you.
I brought a bit of a cast of thousands today, but there was a reason for that, because it's a very broad set of topics that we're looking at. So we've got colleagues from both the client side and the Amy One Trafford partnership side. So Keith Harris is our traffic manager through and basically maintains the matrices that we're talking about. Yes, it's possible to put one out, but as with every plan that we do, when we issue it on a 6-monthly basis, as it says, it will be out of date the next day. And that's just a health warning.
And that's fine.
Yeah.
We expect it's just a snapshot. We don't expect a kind of running score. That would be ridiculous.
Yeah.
But it would be, in the interest of transparency, really good if you could have a periodic snapshot.
We can have a look at what we can do on that one and get back to you on it. Keith, do you want to take us through the other question, which was about the scoring and how the matrices put together?
Sure, yes, thank you, Councillor Jones. I think the first thing to say is each request is assessed under the same scoring and the same weighting, so there's a consistency across all the requests, and I think it's fair to say that we could probably debate lots of times what those specific weightings are for each particular item that's on the framework that you've been presided. We've come to a decision to sort of use selected weightings for different categories. So I haven't actually got the TRO matrix in front of me. I've got all the others, ironically, because it's in the presentation. But for the casualty, if you take an example of the casualty score, there will be a weighting in relation to the severity of the casualties. So a fatal collision would score a higher total than a serious and then a slight. So it's merely just a means of providing a consistent weight difference between each class of casualty in that instance. So similarly for some of the other items, we like speed limits and so on. With the pedestrian generators is on there, so you score a point for the number of facilities within the vicinity of the request, so that the severity of any item on that framework is given a higher score if there's more facilities. So if you can imagine the A56 with a junction there with collisions occurring, history of collisions would score highly than say a residential cul-de-sac where you don't have any facilities in the vicinity. So that's how the matrix is intended to differentiate between the different types of conditions on the highway.
Just come back on that. Thank you. Understand that. But again, in the interest of transparency, these matrices are often a bit of a mystery. I've asked for information before for residents. I'm going to go into any specific examples, but there was it was given that they were 75th on a list and they had a score of 80 or something like that. What would be good is how was that calculated? Oh, you've talked about the weightings, absolutely understand that, but can we have that for all of these calculations and all of these lists? So they kind of go hand in hand. So you'll have your list of where we're at, and this is the details on how the matrix and scores were calculated. That'd be really good. Thank you.
As Chris mentioned, yeah, we can provide some information. What we caution us is overpowering with the detail and the complexity of the weight matrices and the weightings and so on, but I'm sure we can provide some information to yourselves.
There always comes. I think I switched it off. I apologise. There always comes a little bit of a health warning with these. It's not just the fact that we're quite happy with providing transparency to the matrix. The issue comes that basically we have a pretty large backlog of these, and it is a large amount, and in terms of the budget level that we can actually do, it is a very small percentage of those. So it's very emotive for people about where that scoring lies, and we've got to base. And I think hopefully from the presentation you picked up, what we're trying to do with each and every one of the topics on consideration today is look at it from a science base. So we're not, and we are actively trying to make sure that we're doing it in a fair and reasonable manner because of the limited resources that we've got to spend on the network.
Just add to some of it, good chair. Obviously, I've been involved with some of this for quite a few years now, and it is very complex. It covers many different areas. I mean, each year there's every limited budget. I mean, if you go back a long time, I think we used to have something like £250,000 on minor works type things, and now it's obviously shrunk significantly. So you do have hundreds of schemes on the waiting list, and it's quite a dynamic matrices, because obviously things change during the year. Assessments could change, new schemes could be added, some schemes could be done and drop out. It also, I think, has been highlighted as well potentially, is that it might be that some things are funded other ways. For instance, if we was to do something like someone said, we just done Kingsway, it might be there was a number of schemes outstanding on that didn't get full priority, but because it was done funded in a different way, they've dropped out, so that changes the scoring. A few years ago, I did actually also ask for something like some extra points if something is around a school, so that bumps up something around a school location, give it those extra points there as a priority from administration's point of view, what to see schools pumped up a little bit. But the thing is, obviously, each year there's so many, we'll pick up a small number of schemes across each different area, so you might get so many traffic regulation orders, say like a few drop curbs, traffic islands, school street, and they're all prioritised. So it's, in that sense, you pick a small number out each year. There's only going to be a couple of each one done each year, so it becomes very difficult. And there's literally hundreds of them, and it does change. So I mean, the other thing that might be useful, I don't know whether some members might find it useful, whether or not they could actually see a list allocated against each criteria. So if it's near a school, it gets so many points. If it's near something else, it gets so many points. And a major or minor action, that sort of thing. So they get different levels of points added to it. Each assessment. So whether members would see that as something useful, I don't know, but that is available there. But obviously, I think Chris said a minute ago as well, that they do change. What might be the top of the list today isn't going to be top of the list tomorrow, but isn't actually something at the top of the list that might get it. If something is being done through another mechanism, then that might be a bit lower down. So it's very complex, and I can understand people's frustration when they see it working. But I think it's hopefully members have got a bit of a flavour of this now. And I think, obviously, if we can assist further, absolutely, I'd like members to actually really understand this. I don't know if that's helpful or not.
Can I just come back?
Yep.
Yeah, thanks. I'm going to let other people ask questions now. But the reason for my questions is to actually have some transparency and lack of mysterious black magic behind the matrices and the lists. Okay, thank you.
Totally agree with that. And the one tiny little point that I will say. Councillor Adsed's alluded to it. The list is obviously what we go on to start off with for our own money. But if we do get, and there is options for things like Sale West and Altrincham, there are options for other projects that go along. And as the councillor alluded to, if we do get an opportunity to put and build in one of the existing schemes into one of the projects that we're able to do for active travel, that will be accelerated. Don't really make an apology for that, because it brings the list down to hopefully a more manageable part. But when it comes to our money, that's where the matrices is absolutely key, because it does give a fair basis for it. The points made about transparency, and we'll make sure you've got access to the various plans.
Thank you very much. Do any other councillors have questions on the matrices? Councillor Holden.
Microphone on. When I first saw this presentation, my immediate reaction was something going way back in my history. A guy called Petronius Arbiter, Roman 1st century AD. And I'll quote you something that he said. "We tend to meet any new situation by reorganizing, and a wonderful method it can be for creating the illusion of progress while producing confusion, inefficiency, and demoralization." I only thought that for a few minutes. I completely withdraw it. This piece of work is the best thing that we can give to every single member to use in their conversations with their residents. It defines the scale of the problem, it defines the nature of the problem, and it sets in concrete the fact that it's going to be years before we have anything like the right amount of resource to be able to do something with it. I found the whole document very, very impressive, and you should be proud of it. And the one other comment, while we're on the classics, those of you who've heard of a guy called Sisyphus. Sisyphus rolled a stone up a hill all day. And when he got to the top of the hill, it rolled right down to the bottom, and he had to start again from where he'd begun. You're not far from that, but on your way up, you're making some changes, and thank you.
That feels like an average Tuesday in the Highways Department at times. We have across. Thank you very much for those comments. There's a lot of detail in the presentation, and one of the reasons for bringing the people that we've brought today is so that we could get, if there are concerns, and hopefully to clarify some of that. There are lots and lots of reds, greens, yellows, so on and so forth, and various colours in there, which will provide a lot of detail as to what we are. Hopefully, we can kind of bring that into some themes that you can take away. One of the key ones is that we will make, and it goes through the prioritisation of the highway schemes as well. It goes into the prioritisation of the road safety items. Is that we do have a small amount of money, and anybody who's visited the depot and various things will have probably heard me say that on a regular basis. But what we are trying to do is to make the most of what we've got, and to try and utilise a control system to make sure that we can move through the priorities in as quick a way as we possibly can, by utilising external money as well as our own from other active travel and other items of work which hopefully people have seen around the borough.
Thank you very much. Councillor Coggins.
Thanks. Yeah, so we've got an example of two of the matrices here, I think, on page 31, which I think is just the top line. So we imagine then that there's a list of streets down the side, I guess. And I think, as Councillor Jones has said, we did talk in the pre-scrutiny meeting about it would be great if we could see some screenshots of the actual, so we could get our heads around it. But the thing that I don't see on those, and I realise there are others, we've been told over the years that the number of resident complaints is one of the criteria used. Now, there's always a tension because between, I think, being responsive, because you want to be responsive to complaints, but also inclusive, because we know, of course, that in certain areas people are more empowered to, you know, to get out there and have the capacity to do that. So is the number, or where do residents' issues come into play in all of this? Does it matter if 15 people report the same problem, or does it not matter? I see there's a bit for Councillor MP and Chief Exec, but I don't see residents. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a difficult call to make. There's pros and cons of having a number of residents' complaints. It could skew the number of requests on a particular street or item. It gives an idea of a weight of feeling in the community. I understand that, but as I say, it could skew the results of all the individual items. So we use the sort of proxy of council and MP as a sort of a measure of people complaining to yourselves as ward members or the MP. Rather than just the complete number of residents that complain to us.
Councillor, if I can just add to that, obviously from a historic point of view, pre-2015, people have asked what you've asked for many years. Clearly, psychologically in your head as a traffic engineer, if one person raises something or 50, that registers, but it's looked at as its own individual merits. It can take one request to get something considered. If somebody puts a petition in, that can mean that the community are more empowered. It can mean that people try and skew the figures. So there's no, what I think we'll probably do is, the issue is has it been raised by an elected member? Has it been raised by an MP? That is just on there as a requisite of, do we need to keep members updated on it? But there's no scoring or weighting to that. And that's always been the case.
Councillor Hartley, you're on the list next anyway.
Thank you, Chair. It follows on quite well from Councillor Coggins' question. Yeah, so I guess if you're a ward councillor and you've got an improvement you want to see in the highway or an active travel piece of infrastructure that you'd like, I agree with Councillor Jones, actually. It does seem like the matrices are all a bit dark and a bit hidden. It's useful to see those screenshots. And I guess just following on from Councillor Coggins' question and the answers to that, as a ward councillor, I always have this debate as to, okay, should I raise it and say, I'm raising this as a ward councillor, people have contacted me about it, or would I actually be better to say to residents in my ward, you should all write it individually, because if... so I'm still a little unclear on that, but my question actually was around... we have a process for people to bring petitions to council meetings, and a number of those have been around safe crossing points. So we saw the crossing on Dunham Road, which is there now, which I think probably was active travel funding, and we saw the petition for a crossing on Park Road in Timperley, which is in the budget to be done. Now, in my own lay eyes, I can see places that I think are more of a priority for safe crossing points than the location on Park Road in Timperley. I don't make any criticism of the people who brought the petition or councillors who supported it, but I suppose my question is, there's nothing in the matrix about has a petition been brought to a council meeting, but those things that have been brought to a council meeting by way of a petition do seem to happen. So why is that? What's the governance around that? Is that a criteria in the matrix?
I think we've just said, Councillor, one request will get a location on the waiting list, regardless of whether it's one or a petition or so on. That's why we've taken that kind of view, really, to not skew the results by, giving too much, to a greater emphasis on a petition where the other factors in the matrix will actually allocate the scores to a location, whether it's meritorious or not, we'll give it that priority. So we've less priority in terms of the number of requests, but we put more emphasis and weighting on the objective factors that we can monitor and measure, such as casualties and number of facilities and the impact on crossing and so on and so forth. So it's less kind of weighting on where the request has come from, but more in the objective reasons for wanting an improvement at those particular locations. So I hope that kind of makes some sense. I'm not sure about the specifics of the locations that happen to have petitions that then get work done, whether that, I'm not sure, you know, in the detail of those particular locations of how they got onto the capital programme.
Just if I could just add to some of that as well, obviously Councillor Hart's mentioned those petitions that went to Council. As one of the exec members and for the highways, I see a lot of petitions that don't come to Council or get reported elsewhere. So I see those and I have to sort of discuss them and sign off a course of action with them. And quite often they've actually added to one of the matrices and can be scored, and they always write back to them there. So I think what I wouldn't want to see is something whereby if something does that, they'll get priority. I don't think that is the case. I think sometimes there's something, a funding mechanism we mentioned earlier is in place somewhere, we can actually do it another way. And that's the way we'll try and approach it. But I always want to try and some fair consistency. So if somebody puts in 5,000 names, it doesn't mean necessarily they're going to get that. But if somebody puts in one, and that is something that's important, and something in place, that it might be something, the scheme got in place already, or some funding there for something similar, it's been on the cards for a while, that can actually help with things. But obviously, just try and use the right terminology. So just because you get lots of petitions or something isn't definitely going to mean it's automatically going to get done. It's what I think, as Keith has just indicated, it's actually the scoring it gets on that system there is actually what will drive that across many, because I see many requests for things and I look at those matrices, and I'd like to do more of them, I really would, and that's, I'd like to do all of them if possible, but it comes down to the funding that we've got at the end of the day, and those that score the highest in those, within those certain categories, will get those sort of priorities. But what we'd like to do as much and spread it as far as we can. And as Chris said earlier, we'll use other funding mechanisms to do these where possible. But just because somebody shouts out loud, it doesn't mean they're going to get that priority. I can assure you of that.
Could I just, sorry, I apologise, Councillor Hartley, but the first part of your question as well was, should you put something across, or should you get people to write in? Either is the answer. We'd like the councillors to be on board with these. A lot of active travel crossing points can be quite divisive in certain areas. You would think not, actually, in a lot of places, but they are. And because of the road versus walking, cycling kind of atmosphere that's out there, unfortunately, that we have to deal with. We unfortunately say no too many times to a lot of things, which is I don't think you'll meet any more frustrated group of people than around this table that we can't do more with what we do. What we do want to do is to just make sure that when we're allocating it, we're allocating into the place that gets the safest outcome, if you like, for the money that we've actually got. But please, what I would say is, I wouldn't stop anybody coming forward with an idea. It's a changing environment. It's a changing set of geography out there with demographies that change on a regular basis. New skills, new elements of things that go along. We need to know so that we can actually react to that as well. So it's actually quite good that the matrix does change on a regular basis. The other slight point, which is there, is if we do know about it, if there is funding which is geographic based, Swanee I mentioned before, which is the West and Altrincham network improvement, then that obviously will push that area forward first. Now, we're not always au fait with what comes forward in terms of ideas, but if those are there and they're on the matrix, then very much likely to be considered if we do get funding which is bounded by a geographical area.
Just something I almost forgot, Chair. In general terms, when we do get requests, petitions, whatever, it might be, for instance, you say for a crossing point. I know we haven't got the finances for that, but if we look at it and it's looks like it's fairly critical and things like that. We could, for instance, suggest like a pedestrian island as an alternative, which is a much cheaper thing. So these things can be looked at and are looked at, but it's actually just people don't always think of those up top. So I know Keith and his team, when doing those assessments, it is an assessment. It isn't just say, oh, they want a crossing and that's it, goes on the list for a crossing. They'll actually assess that location and see if that's the best needs. But if Keith wants to add to that, I don't know. I'll see if he wants to. But that's the direction we're coming from. So.
No, absolutely right, Councillor. I'd said that there could be opportunities to improve the signing, for instance, a location rather than a formal crossing. As you say, just something that gives value to the community, better value. But the item could remain on the list for something more substantial. But if we can do something at a lower cost, then certainly we'd look at doing that. So, yeah, as Chris said, by all means put the request through. We need to know what the community aspirations are.
I'm going to move to Councillor Jarman because he's been waiting for some time now to ask a question.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, so we obviously get hundreds. You obviously get hundreds of these requests a year. In fact, well, it's in the thousands. So I'm just going to ask a question about the mechanics of the assessment. Is it done on like a desk exercise, or do you actually go and do some surveys of the actual area, traffic surveys or pedestrian surveys, or is it a bit of both? And what's the criteria for deciding one or the other, or when you actually do an actual visual survey?
Okay, thank you, Councillor Jarman. The exercise is a desktop exercise to create the initial priorities. Once we have identified the sort of top priorities, we would then do a few more surveys and more sort of site surveys to identify the need or the ability or the feasibility of putting measures at that location has been requested. So it is a little bit of both. But generally, because we've got so many requests and so many on the list, it's not feasible to do full traffic surveys at all the locations, as you'd probably expect. It would be far too expensive to do that. So we do a comparable desktop exercise with all locations. Clearly, some of the data is purely objective. So the collision data we collect, that's a fact that we have the tools to measure those. And I don't want the impression you go away thinking, oh, we have to wait for an accident to happen, do we, before we'll do anything. It's not that, it's the other way around. That's an evidence of there is an issue in that location, which gives it a weighting. So, I know that's something the community often think that they have to have an accident before anything takes place. It's not. That gives it that priority over other locations where there aren't those instances.
Okay, thanks, Keith.
Just one tiny section though is the priority is getting as much money into the ground as possible. And I think us doing, although a desktop exercise, yes, it is obviously less in depth than doing a full survey, but the full surveys can be very expensive. And in terms of doing those surveys on a lot or a big chunk of these, it does mean that we actually physically do less in the floor, and that's got to be the priority that we choose.
Do I have any questions from anyone who's not asked one so far on this item? Go on, Councillor Frass.
Yeah, thank you. I think, I just want to say I do support the idea of the transparency, not just, let's look at the whole matrix, but I think teaching members what the points are, because if you're on the door, you're doing you're an elected member, you could actually say to your residents, to be honest with you, it's not near a school, or it's not whatever those points are. We're a little bit in the dark about that. And actually, if I sort of knew that, I'd think you can almost level with them and say, to be honest with you, I support what you're saying, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, but in reality, these are the factors. So I just want to say I think that's very good. And I'm also guessing if something's on the cusp, you're just saying about getting more money in the ground. If you've got one that perhaps is a little bit lower, but it's half the price, you think, well, before the end of the financial year, although there's one above it, rather than let that budget go, you might there might be some of that, I don't know. But I'm just saying, I'm just guessing that might happen. My question is, though, I wonder how you handle pressure. We talked about pressure from elected members, pressure from petitions and all this, people writing in. Do you ever get pressure maybe from executive members or officers, chief executives to, you know, move things? How do we keep it fair with that pressure as well, coming in from the other end to say, oh, push this up the list? Because again, we want to keep it scientific and fact-based. You know, I just wonder if you want to speak to that.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. One of the reasons, the reason for doing this is the blunt answer. We have to be accountable for everything we're doing. We're in front of scrutiny now, you know, and to be frank, if we didn't have a system like this, and I totally take the point about transparency on that, and we will work towards making you aware of each of the bits in there. But the reason for having it is to make sure that I can turn around and say, well, if the science doesn't support it, we're not doing it. So I think that's it's important for as an officer to be able to say this is the science when I'm giving that to the exec member to say this is what we recommend, and therefore it's a record, if you like of where we've had things come into us. And that other point that I made to Councillor Hartley's point, it actually gives us a much more of a feel of what's actually happening on the network out there. People's hobby horses, we don't want that. We want to be able to make a difference to what we do.
Well, I follow the process like every other member as well, myself, to highways. I've got a number of requests in, including some yellow lines that will never make it, I don't think. So, but I won't use that position because obviously that process is there and it all has to be followed. So I put my message into traffic members, traffic and others, I think as officers around here will actually be able to say that. So I follow the same procedure as anybody else.
Any questions from any other members that haven't asked a question yet? Any questions from anyone else? Go on, Councillor Hartley.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on my last question. I'm afraid I'm still unclear on the role that a petition to a council meeting might play in this prioritisation. So I'm not necessarily asking for an answer now, Chair, because we've had a lot of information about it already, but I'm not sure I'm any clearer. But I think it goes to the point which other members have raised about transparency of the matrix and prioritisation. So I'm not clear on that particular point. If the petitions don't play a part, I can only assume that Park Road in Timperley was high up the list. That's why it's got a budget allocation this time. I can only assume that, you know, the location on Dunham Road, although it's the Swanee funding, that we'd already prioritised that as a location to make those sorts of improvements rather than elsewhere in that area. So I think I just echoed a call for some transparency. And I think the reason we're all asking for this is because I mean, let me just say, it is a really useful report, and I really commend everybody that's been involved in putting it together. And I think Councillor Holden, I agree, this would be a really good thing to roll out to members during their induction, so they know what to say on the doorstep and they know what to say when we get requests for lots of improvements in the road. But I do think the reason we're asking for that transparency is because, you know, we know the situation that you're in, that there just isn't that much money to go around and most things are going to be a no. So for the things that are a yes and they do happen, I guess what I'm looking for is some assurance around the governance and the decision making around that so that we know why that's been prioritised above other schemes. So thank you. The only question I had as a follow-up to that was a similar one about prioritisation, which was the spend on highways as opposed to footways and cycleways. So we are spending quite a lot on footways and cycleways, which is good. But my reading of the report was that I think 80% of the footways are red or amber, which is arguably worse than the highways. So where is that decision taken on what allocation goes to the road and what allocation goes to footways and cycleways? How is that worked out? Thank you.
My excuse is I'm colourblind, but I can see red. so just that it's in the way. No, thank you for the comments about the report. The petition, I think you're actually spot on with what you said about the two areas. We have turned down quite a number of petitions, unfortunately. Not always the easiest reports to write, as Keith writes them for me, and then we push them on. In terms of footways are obviously a big priority for us, but we have to first and foremost go with the safety issue. And in terms of the presentation, I think you see some of the breakdown of in the carriageways and the breakdown in the footways. To summarise, and Sean is far more qualified than me to do this, but to look at the detail of it. But the real impact is where we can have most effect on safety. So the vast majority of our spend goes on the ABC network and not on the U-Class network. The U-Class network is 77% of what we look after, but we do put it into that ABC to stop fatal injuries, very bad injuries that people can have in vehicles and out of vehicles. Within the footways are really emotive because we know we have some very vulnerable people who utilise those footways. And what we're trying to do is to maximise the spend that we can do on there within a reasonable envelope of what we do. But a fact of life and fact of reality is one of the things that informs what we do are claims. And it shouldn't be in terms of being retrospective, but unfortunately it's an indicator of where we have. And at this moment in time, we have a low level of footway claims, which is completely against what Mark One Eyeball says when you wander around Trafford, and what we've been trying to do certainly with the Swanee project, because of an element of underspend on there, and what can we do, was to actually look at how we can connect elements of pedestrianisation, so we can get new footways in place with money that's external to the budget. With the internal budget that we got to spend, we could burn our entire budget on footways and have a massive safety issue on the actual A, Bs and C networks. So what we do have to do is to make sure that we almost cut our cloth accordingly from that safety principle first and foremost, and that's usually the parameters behind the design, behind the decision making. Sean, Les, have you got anything to add on that, James? Maybe.
I can go into the detail and talk all day about it. It's my day job. But as Chris has already mentioned, the safety lies in those A, B and C road networks that thousands of people travel, not just residents of the borough, where the majority of the accidents occur, and we've got to be seen to be addressing those safety issues first and foremost. We would love lots more money and we'd be able to do lots more footways, but the reality is we don't and we can't.
There are elements of places where we do have disabilities, and we try and push those up the sort of the list where we've got the ability to do so. So there are lots of points that are made from members and from the public about areas that a footway that we can do. Unfortunately we're doing a small percentage of them, and that is that's not something we're very very happy about if we're really honest. But we are where we are.
Councillor Coggins.
I want to follow up on the footways. So obviously what you don't see in terms of crashes and that is the people who, like you say, are vulnerable and decide, actually, it's too icy outside, my pavement hasn't been gritted, I can't get my walker or wheelchair safely across this rough ground, or I can't safely walk or cycle my kids to school, so I'm going to go in the car. And of course, we could do loads of things that would reduce safety, like changing speed limits, like reducing the number of HGVs going through our roads with filtered streets, and charging people more for parking large vehicles and things like that we're choosing not to do. So it feels like the footways are being perhaps neglected because we're not seeing evidence of crashes, but that's because the vulnerable people aren't going out. In those particular times, we get messages from residents who say, well, I couldn't go out for the last 2 weeks because it hasn't been gritted outside my house, or as I say, my walker won't go to the corner shop because the path is too rough. And it feels like there are lots of other things we could do to reduce the risk of crashes on the road and free up some money to spend on footways.
It is a choice that we have. Around this, and what we do try and do is to give as many options as is possible. Just to give a view though in terms of where that budget actually lies at this moment in time. I think there's a slide in there that gives you an idea of just exactly how far behind we are from roads dropping into the red, which is basically which brings out 720 million pounds over 10 years, 7.2 million pounds a year, stops the road surfaces dropping into red. It doesn't stop the road surfaces dropping from green to amber, however, which is the problem. We are currently working way below that. As you see, I think the slide says 19 million over 10 years, or 1.9 million pounds as an average. So we're 5 million less than we really need to stop things going into red. Now, the politics of it, I will leave to other people more qualified than me. But one of the major issues that we get are potholes. The forever kind of mentioned issue, which is extremely loudly raised by lots of people. So we are unfortunately under quite a lot of pressure being pulled left, right, and centre for what is a very small amount of money. Some of the road treatments that you talk about, the speed limits and so on, we can look at it, and we have looked at elements of 20 mile an hour parts of it. But each one of those takes up a huge amount of budget as well. So realistically, to keeping our road condition in a safe manner, if we were to get a budget increase in there, then I don't doubt we would look at some other ways of tackling that and getting people out into walking paths. We've also got the external money that we've talked about numerous times tonight that we're trying to tap into to actually make sure that we can do that in an approach that means that we can target it in certain areas. From money from TFGM, so that we can kind of improve people's lives in a more meaningful fashion, because we're actually putting large scale footways together rather than patching, which is unfortunately what we've got the funds to do at this moment in time if we take away that external money.
Just add, if I could quickly, Chair, just obviously following the severe winter, there was a review of looking at all the places with gritted and so forth, and that was reviewed completely. And I'm sure it'll be looked at again before the coming winter, but obviously Duncan Local Authority does every footpath everywhere on EU areas. It's impossible and never have done. In that sense, obviously, if there are locations that might be helpful, there is a process that members can actually put in for that and actually have that to be considered. In that sense, and generally, I think Chris has covered some other points generally around, I'd love much more money for minor work. We could do more traffic regulation orders, put in drop curbs, put in weight restrictions, all sorts of things. It's just put in a TRO, it costs thousands of pounds, just the consultation and the advertisement, and the implementation can be quite small in some cases, but it's actually the work around it is quite costly to do all that lot. So I'd love to do much more of it. I really would. It'd make things so much better if we could do that.
If I may just follow up, I mean, I did suggest, that we know that other councils charge more for you to park a very large SUV type vehicle. So there are ways that we can raise money. So the answer can't all be about we don't have the money. There are options for raising money from the highways that we are not taking.
Apologies, I missed that one off my list. We are doing a thorough review of the parking charges this year. We've inherited the parking department. The highways has taken that on board, and we're doing a thorough review of what we've got. We'll bear that in mind, without a doubt, to have a look at it. And just one little mention of the winter maintenance. This winter we did miss hail, actually, when we did it, which is a communication issue. To be honest, within what we did, so there's an apology there that we missed that off. And what we are doing is to look at the winter maintenance plan. It's a couple of years old now, but we have 5 gritting routes that keep everybody safe, hopefully on the A's and a few of the B roads, and keep our buses moving through the winter. But we do only have the resources to do the P1 routes, which are on the website, that we can do. But what we do have when we have snow and ice conditions, we have other people that we utilise for other duties. So if we've got street cleaning, you can't clean a street that's got ice on it. So basically, we do utilise those guys for other things around the areas, like areas around schools, area around old people's homes, and also making sure that we service the town centres to do it, with the exception of hail this year, which will not happen again. So,
Thank you, Councillor Axford.
Yeah, it kind of follows on from Councillor Coggins' one. I mean, obviously I've done a task and finish report and all this, so I've got masses to say, but I'll just try and keep it brief. I just think it's really sad, isn't it, that cars create the collisions and kill people on the roads, and we're also endless kind of task of repairing our roads, which will continue to deteriorate, and we've got the heavier cars with the EVs, and it's like a never-ending battle, so I don't envy your job at all. And you've already alluded to the active travel stuff, but I wondered how much, and you said kind of it was political as well, but I wondered how much priority, how do you connect it all up, or how much priority is given to try and to reduce car usage in terms of what you're doing. I've got some other questions. We need to stop now, don't I?
Thanks for that, to be honest. The answer that I think, well, the last 3 years, I think when at the start of my tenure here, 6 years now, we were spending a very small amount on active travel, because money wasn't really available to do that from central government. Around the pandemic, some money started to come in terms of the active travel, emergency active travel fund, I think it was called at the time, the EATF, and that has bloomed into an element of a work stream which we would hope we're seen as very proactive in. We have our carriageway budget that we need to keep ourselves as a council. We have a statutory responsibility to keep the roads open. On top of that, there is a real effort from both sides of the partnership to make sure that we can put in as much active travel infrastructure as we can do, while keeping our roads in as good a condition as we can. Those funding streams are completely separate. I would like to make that, as I've picked up quite a lot of social media kind of issue around why don't we just fill the potholes with the active travel fund money and so on and so forth. I will be very clear on that we would not have kept the cones out for 4 years on the A56 if we didn't think that there was a real opportunity for a different way of traversing the top end of Trafford. We've not in my team actually, but in Adrian Fisher's team, we've appointed a transport planner to look at this. That also knits into a gentleman that works for the One Trafford Partnership, to make sure that we, with our programme manager and with the team under Les, actually put together credible and linked together cycling and walking solutions so that we can hope to tie it together. There are maps available online. I think most people have seen Doug going around and seen some of the ideas that we're coming up with, and hopefully now people can see from the infrastructure that's actually on the A56 after a long and tortuous relationship with cones, which I'm glad to be seeing the back of, if I'm honest. But now we've got a credible infrastructure there that hopefully people can use and get the next generation of cyclists, but also encourage walking and different types of transport on our main arterial routes.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris. And just to add to that, as well as the heavy civils that they go in, working with One Trafford Partnership, we have bikeability courses, crucial crew, and also activations once schemes are complete to try and encourage people to shift modes onto interactive travel. So that's in support of the civil schemes we have too.
I'll just add to what James just said as well, around schools particularly, because obviously I think mentioned that's quite an important area. Sometimes it isn't the huge expenditure like we spent on things like the A56, but it's working with schools to actually encourage more walking to schools. Obviously, we're not just talking about school streets, which we're actually active looking at, but there's also little schemes that they can go into schools and actually kids can get little rewards for the amount of miles they walk to and from school each day. And other schemes like those sort of things are very important. Also working with the staff to actually, are there other options around other than driving in? So it isn't just about parents, it's about the staff as well. So there's all the sort of schemes that we do. And we obviously work with, I've got a little committee set up, I set up a few years ago, and they meet quite a number of times, and we go talk through a lot of these issues there and actually how we can actually work with those schools. And again, with everything, it's get all schools to get a visit each year from the parking service, and it's turned on the number of problems that we've got, and that can be varied. So we do work with them to try and get, first of all, to enforce where we can around schools, the parking, but also to actually look at measures that can actually encourage kids to walk and actually engage kids within those within those little schemes as well, like road safety champions and things like that. So they actually all tinker away at these sort of things, and it's the kids actually will marvel the parents if they get a little reward for walking to school, and it's competitive within the school, then those kids actually marveling their parents to do it. So that's the sort of thing that we do. So there's a whole range of things we can do. Don't have to do the big giant things like we've done on the 56, but it's the little things as well that can make that difference as well.
Thank you. Is there anyone who's not asked a question yet who'd like to ask one?
On the matrix or in general, Chair?
General. Go on.
Okay, as Chris brought it up, hello and thank you everybody. I know some of you, I'm sure you had a long day today and it's getting on a bit now, so I'll try and be brief. I'm around potholes in the first instance, and the way that we repair them, it seems to me that we just infill. And I'd be intrigued to know how many we return to within 6 months, because I can think of many on my road. I can think of many on Brooklyn Avenue and across the borough. I'm astounded that we're not either hot or cold joint sealing them, because that gives flexibility to the pothole. I can't believe that we're not cutting away to make them square, which makes the sustainability of the pothole more secure. It may cost a little bit more money, but then again, how much does it cost to revisit? And recently, there was a pothole filled on Earl Road, and about 1.3 metres away, there was another big pothole that was, well, it's still there. So we're going to go back to that. I think we need to work a little bit smarter on things like that, and whereby, for example, Woods End Circle, right outside my house, we've done half of it, but there's potholes right around the other side, and the seam of the central carriageway is coming away. We go back to that. It's another job, it's another cost. I appreciate that, and I've spoken at length with Andy Haig about this, about the sealant. I appreciate the cost, and I appreciate that there's a supposed slip risk with that, but United Utilities, they seal them, Norweb or the Electricity Board, Power Gen, they seal them, Virgin Media, all sealed, and you get very, very little return from that. I'm just looking about the return to potholes to repair, the number of times and the way that we repair them. It seems as though we're trying to do it very, very quickly, which will appease residents who we all have to answer to. very, very quickly, but from a red route, it moves to a green route, then back into an amber route, and back up to a red route, and it's an ongoing vicious circle. And it could be the funding behind it all that's led us to this circle of recurring potholes in the same positions, the same holes returning. And if say, and I'm pulling figures out of the air, but if we said we did 100,000 potholes a year, but had to return to 70,000 of them, it's better to do 80,000 a year and return to 5,000 of them, surely. I just wondered what the way forward in rethinking, not wasting money. And I'm not saying that anybody here is wasting money. What I'm saying is there are options that we can use whereby we may spend a little bit more on individual ones, but cut them away, putting in ragged edges, it doesn't seal. It doesn't lend itself to being a robust repair. It's a repair, and I understand the pressure that you're under from all of us here. Everyone that gets a pothole or a resident phoning them up, we're on to you, whether it's through Trafford members or in some cases, I know some people, not looking inwardly, myself, have spoken to people directly. I understand the pressures, but I think that we should be looking to help to get it so it's not so recurrent and the repairs are more permanent. Thanks.
I couldn't agree more. But potholes are seen as the problem. Yeah? In the presentation, there's a big section about what a pothole is. There isn't a big section about what a pothole isn't. The reason I say that, and I'm not being flippant about it, there are two different conversations. There's a conversation about potholes, and that conversation is about safety. And there's an element in there that tells you exactly and it's a set of rules that we haven't drawn up yesterday. This is across the country, and we're seen as one of the best practice, by the way. We were audited within the last 2 months by Zurich Insurance around this. Now, again, that's money based. So yes, I completely see your point. But the first thing is, and I'll take the overbanding bit in a minute. We'll talk about that. But in terms of what a pothole actually is, a pothole is a symptom. Now, a pothole is a very specific thing, and that's why in the presentation there is a section that says what our intervention criteria are. It's a particular safety issue, and the popular press and everybody out there has a go at me about potholes, and every day I say it's not the potholes that are the problem, because we have a KPI that measures One Trafford performance here and One Trafford partnership performance on filling potholes. Now, we don't pay per pothole, by the way. The Trafford Council doesn't pay per pothole. It basically that is an Amy's risk, and that is a cost fee. So, but everything you've just said, we work together to try and make it a better, more cost effective approach, because it's the way the partnership works. But in terms of the two sections, we have this first part, which is potholes, which are the intervention criteria is there about 40 millimetres. I nearly brought a golf ball because I knew this question would come up. You sometimes carry one around in my orange jacket. Don't challenge me on it. But basically, one of the issues there is to make sure that the pothole that's in the wheel track has got 40 millimetres. So when you raised the example about one that was actionable, probably next to it was probably 20 millimetres. If it was 40 millimetres, then the inspector should have picked it up. But I'll take that point. We're not there. We can't see it. But the point being, we've also got a fund which administered to try and make sure that those situations go away. Where something, if it's 37 millimetres next to a 40 millimetre one, just do it as one, and that's something that we're working on in terms of the partnership. The problem we've got is where a pothole is not a pothole, which is the cracking on the edges, the cracking in the middle of it, and that's an asset management problem, and that's where the majority of the slides in this are focused around asset management. That doesn't help you at all on the doorstep when people say potholes are a problem, because they don't say asset management's a problem. And our issue here is this is one of the reasons why in the last 4 to 5 years we've done a lot more surface dressing than we've done before. Surface dressing, old language, but treatment on top of what we're doing. It is about longevity of what we've actually got. As you can see from the from many of the slides there, this is about actually making sure that what we've got lasts a bit longer. I talked about the £7.2 million before. The £7.2 million will stop roads getting from orange to amber to red. They won't stop roads from going to green to amber. So we will have a deteriorating asset, even at a spend of £7.2 million a year, and we're a long way away from that. So I get your frustration around the potholes. It's not a cost that is borne by Trafford as a council, but it is something that we will try and address with what we don't want to be going back. We don't want anybody to go back. We don't want the perception that we're going back too many times to things. But sometimes there might be a reason. It might be a temporary fix because we're coming along to do surface dressing. It may be a temporary fix because of the place that it's in, and we will come back within basically either 7 days or 28 days to do a permanent repair. So there are lots of options with these about where they are. So it's the sweeping statement. I get it. Because we all as highways engineers, we're probably faced with it in the pub every week, where somebody says what's the pothole, what do we do to stop potholes? What we actually need to stop potholes is to move the red areas that we've actually got out of red and into amber, and to do that we need to do the most cost effective way is to do larger scale patches. Larger scale resurfacing to make sure that we've got no gaps. One of the slides in there details how potholes form, and one of the reasons that we get this is the amount of water that collects on the network. So the water that comes into the network freezes and thaws. We have a cold winter, and they develop from there. So basically, if we can rule out and we can get a decent surface on roads, funnily enough, we don't get that problem because there's not the cracks there for the water to go down in the first place. The pothole, basically, people always term it as being the problem. It's actually the end symptom of what we've got. That gives a view for it, and for the overbanding, I'll refer to one of my more technical colleagues for that one.
Chair, if I just quickly respond.
Yeah, of course.
It's not aimed as a criticism. I've benefited from, in my 6 years as a councillor, from conversations with you, with Andy over polls, and I will not argue black is blue with residents. I will tell residents when it meets the criteria. And I will explain to residents of the funding issues that we've got, of the routes that you have to maintain, and that there are deeper and more dangerous issues that need to be redressed. Fully aware of that, and we are in Flixton over the last few years, we've benefited from redressing of roads, or treatment, as we call them now, and we're grateful for that. And it's my point is around the whole area and around thinking out of the box. I would assume that you are all under great pressure from all of us and residents at all, because I've stubbed my toe in a pothole. I understand that. I'm just trying to see whether or not there's a different way of looking at it or a different way of thinking it, and you've probably looked at it, but it's a question that we have to ask to see whether or not, like, for example, the sealing of around the poles, like the cutting square of poles, takes a bit longer, costs a little bit more. Would that not help? That's where I'm at. That's the questions I'm asking, in a way of making it a slightly more permanent, which means that you can do the dressing and the treatment of the roads with a little bit more security on the roads that you don't get to first. That's all.
The answer is yes. So when it comes to, but a lot of those that you will see that will be the plug will be a temporary fix. So What would worry me if that temporary fix is there for a long time, and at that point come back and have a chat, because we'll be looking at that, because it will be one of the things that we're coming down to do surface dressing, or we're going to be doing that, or we should have done the permanent fix on it. In terms of overbanding, it is something that we've talked about with Amy at length about what we do as part of the partnership with it, and we've not kind of come up with the cost effective way of actually making sure that it's the right option at this moment in time. But we are going to look at it, and if it gives you any sense, we are looking for any and every way of making the pothole process. I would actually probably prefer to say the patch process, because at least it gives us a wider sphere than effectively just a very, very, very focused amount. We're looking at any and every type of thing on the market that we can utilise an element of our funding for, to get more amounts done for that bit of the road network. So you take my word on that. We will be looking at anything we can do to maximise the amount of spread that our budget gets to.
Yeah, I must say it is difficult on the reporting side through the website, that you can only put one point. I've just put in something for my father-in-law's road, which is sporadically awful, but it's only a small little cul-de-sac, so it's at the bottom of the list. I understand that, but reporting it, you can't report everything. You can only report one, and one got done. So perhaps that's something that we can discuss with IT when it comes to them being looked at. Well, thank you very much. It's a proper reply, and I'm happy with that. Thank you.
As you know, just one thing to end off with, and then it's the CRM system. Obviously, we just replaced. It is at this moment in time probably replicating what was there in the past. The idea with the CRM system to get it in place, it's working okay for the environmental services department as we're under within IT. It's not where we want it to be though. But the good news is that the CRM platform allows for development. So any ideas around that, then by all means fire them in, and we'll have a look and see what we can change going forward. Heather from the One Trafford partnership has been highly involved in that, and what we're trying to, and I know you all know Heather from various inboxes. It's just to try and make sure that we get as many increases, if you like, in the performance of that CRM in the next 2 years, to kind of fill that gap.
I've raised the CRM a lot of my catch-up meetings, as Chris and others will actually say on that one, and I know the frustrations of members on the old system, and obviously the new system's in, but obviously we haven't got it developed to the stage where we want it to at the moment, so it still shares some of those frustrations, but it's something that we'll certainly be working with the officers to continue, because I think that the officers all share the same concerns as well on that one, so we want to see it develop further so it actually makes those changes that you're suggesting. So if members have got other suggestions actually how to improve that CRM system, then please feed them in, but obviously bear in mind it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to be a gradual process over the coming periods. I'm not sure exactly how long, but it's going to be a next few years it can be developed, but with any suggestions always welcome, please.
Just one final point on that, if I can. Only this evening, before this meeting started, Heather's been mentioned. She's been doing a lot of work in the background on what response a customer gets to their request notification. That has been not in as good a place as it should have been. There has been some work, and something will be going out either later this week or next week on changes to what the customer sees. So for instance, if a defect has already been reported, it won't just be, we're not doing anything here, it'll be, this issue has already been reported and a job has been raised. So that's quite a little subtle tweak in the response back, but that is something that literally has only just come up this afternoon, that she's with the CRM team has been able to get a small but significant communication change in the text, which should hopefully be welcome.
Well, sorry, last point on that point. I've dealt with Heather quite a lot over the last couple of weeks. I think she's fantastic. Her responses are timely. She gives you as much information as she can, and from me, there's 63 of us, and that's probably only half of a job, if that. So from my point of view, and I'm sure I echo with a lot of councillors deal with her, that she performs admirably, and she has nothing but my admiration on that.
Thank you. I'll certainly report that back to her tomorrow.
Thanks. I'm keen to move this on. I've got Councillor Axford waiting, and I've also got Councillor Glenton waiting. I've got you noted down. So, Councillor Axford, do you still have a question?
Yeah, it's just going back to the footways. I wondered what the difference, if you could explain what the difference is between red and amber. And can I ask, it's just, these are all so interlinked. Do you mind if I go on about the footways? The other thing was about gritting. So I seem to remember when I was a child, a long time ago, that they used to have kind of buckets of, didn't they have buckets of grit that people used to use and put on the pavements? Is that something? That was a long time ago, wasn't it? But I'm sure they did. And the other thing about the footways was the trees, because the trees are creating a lot of damage, aren't they? But there's, you know, it's possible to plant trees on the curbside rather than on the pavement. And I wondered if that's something that I think that you are exploring, aren't you? When there's new trees, you could actually park them on the road, and that would hopefully help with parking as well. Thanks.
And Les perked up then when you said grit bins. So,
can I start and address the amber red bandings? And it's true for both carriageways and footways. If the footways on a road are prevalently red, it suggests that the defects are primarily of a structural nature. So you might have rocking flags, you might have depressions that layperson might call potholes, you might have some fairly substantial cracking, you might have some subsidence. Those kind of defects would err towards a red score banding, both for footways and carriageways. Anything of a structural nature. If it's got an amber score, it tends to be defects that are beginning to form, that will undoubtedly become red defects in time if they're not addressed. But that's how the banding operates. So green doesn't need anything doing to it. Amber, you could do some preventative treatments. The surface treatments we talk about on the carriageways address those amber treatments, stop them becoming reds or prevent them becoming reds for a far longer period of time. But once something is red, it's red. Yeah.
Just in terms of the grit bins, there are 92 still around the borough. Would we like to put more? Yes. Have we got funding to put more? No. So as part of the review that we'll be doing this year, we will be looking at. We did look a few years ago when we had a big snow dump event where we had some bridges where, despite lots of gritting going on, vehicles were struggling to get over them. So we did do a bit of focus probably 5-6 years ago after one particular event. So you'll now see probably halfway up the approach. So if that does happen, we don't get gridlock on the network, and people can usually get out and throw some out just to get the network going again until the vehicles have activated the grit and we're able to get the network moving.
Is there some kind of community initiative where you could get people on a road to actually pay for that? Because it's just so cost effective. And it's just so scary when the pavements are icy when you walk a lot. It's just. Yeah.
I think as well, like businesses and stuff, like we get a lot of people from, say near a school or near a nursery, for example, where there's a lot of parents coming and going and they ask to have one. I mean, it could be a good idea.
I know from experience, and sit on GM Highways Group, a number of authorities have done that in the past. They now can't afford to do that either. So it's the same with, again, going back to whether one person asks or a school asks or a care home asks. We would always want to do more, but it's that rebalancing of the overall budget. It's also fair to say that Transport for Greater Manchester are now considering the winter gritting season as part of the overall transport offer, rather than just gritting the highway. It's the other aspects. So that will also go forward for new projects. So when we put in all the extra cycling facilities, particularly segregated, physical segregation, you can't get a gritter down a small cycle lane. But those issues, again, only in the last few months have come up with TFGM. So they they recognise, the Mayor and the Transport Commissioner recognise that how we've done stuff for the last 10, 20, 30 years probably does need to look at, and crucially from Trafford Council's point of view, they recognise the additional financial ask that brings, which was promising to hear.
The placement of trees is, it was the actual species of trees going back many years that's caused some of the issues. Some of them come to end of life now. The ones that do get removed, there's a different species that's going in. For the top of my head, I can't think what the actual names of the trees are, but there is a different type of species that's going in on highway, so it doesn't cover as much issues as it has been in the past.
Go on.
It's just about 20 mile per hour. I mean, when I was doing our task and finish report, we found out that there's a difference between 20 mile per hour zones and just having 20 mile per hour rows in which you just put signage up. And I didn't really get an answer whether that was something that you were doing, and also there was the idea that you could actually be more strategic about your approach to 20 mile per hour rows. So it wasn't just done on request, it was more kind of a strategic direction in how it was done. I realise there's no funding for it, I totally get that. All right, there is funding. But
Yeah, it's essentially the difference between a zone and a speed limit. In a zone, either the environmental or physical traffic calming measures keep the speeds effectively low so that you do not have all the repeater signing, whereas in a speed limit, if you're just targeting, say, a length of road, you would have repeater signs to remind drivers that it's 20 mile an hour. Obviously, there's a debate over the effectiveness of the latter because it relies on heavy enforcement to remind drivers that it is 20 mile an hour. So zones would be more self-enforcing, but obviously they cost more as well for all the physical measures.
I mean, quite a few London boroughs have done it, but they've probably got more funding for enforcement. Yeah, but it does sound like a really good option.
When we're looking at the 20 zones, particularly emphasising the number of locations and people can put in fit now, there's actually a couple of different levels on it. So obviously, as Keith has alluded to, there could be for instance, we're doing near a school or something like that. It could be, for instance, that it might not need road humps, so signage only in some location would work. It's very much the environment it's in, as Keith was saying, and I'm not going to go into the details now given the time on it, but so one option is signage, another option might be enforcement with speed humps and so forth. We've got 3 options around those, so it's something that we do look at in that sense when we're funding those, and obviously if we can get away in a location, if it's safe to do so, putting in just signage, that obviously means there'll be more money for include other schemes within that sort of funding pot.
Councillor Glenton.
Thank you, Chair. My question follows on from Councillor Thomas's question. I just wondered if you could speak a bit about how you assess the quality of a repair and what measures are in place to ensure that repairs are being done to a high standard.
Yeah, there's an audit being done of these on a regular basis, so they are assessed. The quality is checked against the standards required. Is they still there? And they go back. They're not just done. You've done the job and you go straight back to it. There's time and effort involved in leaving it to establish itself. We're actually, as a company, we're looking at a lot of products on the network. We're doing this called Live Lab with different materials. And we're looking at what's going to be best for that for us. So the quality is there, but also the checks on what goes on from a point of audit. I know colleagues from the client team have gone out and checked out some that have been part of I think so it's an audit of the quality, basically.
Yeah, just to add to that, the contract, in contrast, it was set up with self-monitoring. So it was a self-monitoring contract with KPIs that we would then audit down. That's 9 years ago, and we've moved on a little bit. We've now got a client team, so Andy's department, James and Andy's department look at doing spot checks within that as well to make sure that we do that as a tertiary check, if you like. So on top of what we do, we also have full access to the confirmed database, which is basically the tool that's used by Amy's side of the one Trafford partnership to actually monitor those with before and after photographs. So what we do is to make sure that we do a representative sample through that to try and make sure that we've got a check at that point. But realistically, the contract as it's written is self-monitoring, but we do over and above that.
Just very, very quickly, as mentioned, obviously, over the winter, I've been copied into a few emails where people sort of are complaining that repair's been done in a poor way. But when it's come back from Heather, so it's turned out that in that case it was actually a temporary repair, an emergency leisure. So obviously a more permanent one was going to take that a little bit longer. So sometimes it's hard to actually get this correlation. I was just discussing with Andy earlier about this and any options we could actually try and improve the system to let members know if when a temporary repair is done, but it's difficult. So always check the facts out in that sense. But if there's something that is temporary, I think if we could improve the system in which we actually work that out for members, any suggestions would be welcome.
Councillor Thomas, can I just remind officers and the committee just to try and keep it as brief as possible? I'm just conscious that we do have a couple more agenda items and we're getting close to time, so thank you.
That shall only be about 25 minutes. No, I'm joking. Just briefly on drains, and again commending everybody for the once in 80 years event that happened on New Year's Day on Church Road. It did come to a consensus that because of many years of not doing, there are a lot of things that do need doing with the gullies, and we are aware there's 70,000 of them, and I just wondered if there's any formulation of any way forward that we're going to be moving to do that. Obviously, there's some gullies locally that are flowaways that are all silted up to there and not on the main roads, which will be put back, and I understand the reasons why. So have we got any further in how we're going to sort of redress against that? That's basically the drains issue for me, how we redress it eventually.
Yeah, we do have an issue. We have two gully machines. One of them is on cyclical, one of them's on reactive. On an extremely good year where we don't have major events, we can do approximately 15,000 gullies a year, probably less. The 67,000 gullies in Trafford. So we have to take a risk-based approach around that. Now, we have had a risk-based approach that's been that we've adapted every year to make sure that we address the hotspots. I think in January it came as a bit of a shock to in a couple of areas, particularly around Flixton, where there were elements of work that needed to be done. We're working with Amy to actually make sure that risk-based approach goes into the computer systems that we've got to give us actually a look ahead as to what where our cyclical team needs to be. Problem B is that with one cyclical that does the vast majority of those gullies, because it is doing one after another. The other one is reactive, so it may move all the way around the borough depending on where demand is. The more demand there is, the less opportunity you get to use your cyclical. So because we don't have that many. So what we are looking is how we utilise those machines better. What can we do to increase that? Obviously, there is a funding issue with that going forward, but more importantly, work with our colleagues at the EA and UU to make sure that we have the best solutions for things. We're going into a section 19, which is looking at flood issues across the area. Gullies are always very emotive but bearing in mind those things, probably the biggest issue that we've got is claiming a bit of an element of climate change mixed with an aging sewerage system and drainage system, which is at times over 100 odd years old, mixed with building practices over the last 20 to 30 years, which have eradicated some green spaces, which means we've got more through flow of water than we've ever done before. So we're facing some quite big issues, and what we are trying to do this year is to look at the solutions that we've got with our gully emptiers, with the appreciation that 200 100-gallon kind of gully empties are not going to be the whole answer to the challenge that's ahead. We may need more resources in that particular bit with a changing environment going forward. What we're trying to do is to basically model that and make sure that we've got make the most of our cyclical parts, which is the most productive, and shall we say, bring down the amount of reactive that we do which isn't.
Is there anything we can do locally in wards as our each ward council to help you on that, just very briefly? And if there is, can you, if it's a yes, communicate out after the meeting, and I'm sure most of us would be able to do that.
Very, very, very quickly, one of the biggest things that we can do is actually encourage people that if there is a build-up of water, normally, once we've had a heavy rainstorm, within 20 minutes it's gone. If it's not, being honest, a prod down one of the gullies sometimes does help. And I know that sounds absolutely basic, but the amount of reactive work that we do that goes out to something which is very, very easily solved, with a little bit of the public helping us out in some of those areas. Some of those areas, absolutely, we need to send the gully emptier out to. But if there's an element of a prod that sends the water down on some of those, it will make a big big difference to our reactivity times to a lot of the others. And certainly when we get issues like we did around January.
Cue pictures of councillors with sticks going round, sticking them in gullies.
Chair, just very quickly, just to add to Councillor Thomas's point about Flixton particularly, obviously as Chris has mentioned the Section 19 report, I mean obviously I've had some initial discussions with the drainage lead on that one, and about the Environment Ages funding potential that you may have seen and read about in the newspapers and so forth, press release from government on that one there. Although nothing's confirmed as yet, they're talking about potentially, as it relates just to the floods, is that they might be doing some work further upstream, around Didsby and so forth, which might sound odd, but if they do the work up there, that actually stop the amount of water coming down into Flixton. So anything like that can actually really help in that sense. And so that's one matter there. Just on the gullies separately, there is an audit late summer, early autumn, so they did start an audit of all the gullies around there now, and AIM is currently looking at that with a consultant to actually see the best way driving forward at their costs, I would add as well on that sense to it. So once that work's finished, nothing to do with what's happened, this was predates all that lot. So over the next few months, when that set of work is completed, we'll be looking at that, and that will help to drive forward how we actually go forward with maintaining gullies in the future.
I've had 3 more questions in. Please do keep questions and answers brief. Councillor Hartley.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to the answers that we've had, because I think they've provided some really useful information beyond what's in the presentation. So really grateful for that. My question was around, I mean, I think the quality of repairs it is an issue. And Chris, I think you're alive to the issue that, you know, an actionable defect and a non-actionable defect. That's the sort of stuff that makes residents' blood boil, because they can see it happening and it just doesn't make any common sense. It's a bit like the bin lorry going back, emptying one bin on the street. You know, it's. But my question was around quality of repairs on footways, actually, and particularly town centres. And why do we see? So if you look at, say, School Road in Sale or parts of Altrincham, probably not as bad in Altrincham, you see that we've spent a lot of money on paving, it looks nice, and then there's loads of patches filled in with tarmac, and it just looks terrible. And why does that happen? And can we do anything about it? Thanks.
Andy's now going to wax lyrical, so I'm going to
just
keep
very briefly. It's a problem in all our town and village centres. Some of it's historic. Those practices infuriate me more than anybody. In some instances, they're our repairs, which is really, really unacceptable. In some instances, and Councillor Coggins will know this from particularly the Chinese granite in Altrincham, those materials are not as readily available as others. So there is a lag. We've finally managed to obtain some of those materials and start fixing them. Clearly, you refer to School Road, yet those materials historically should have been and probably were more readily available going back 10, 15, 20 years. We obviously can't change back that without a big public realm scheme, but those practices now, I can assure you with my opposite number on the Amy side, will not be happening again as far as is humanly possible. And if they do, by all means let us know and we will respond accordingly.
Thank you, Councillor Frass.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think we have to make sure we're just on Andy Haig's point then, not putting in materials we can't source 3 years down the line. That's important, isn't it? Don't get some fancy stone that looks wonderful and you can't find it when there's a crack. Mustn't do that. We seem to sort of talking all sorts of things, drainage, I think, so I'll just cut now to my question on leaves and leaf sweeping, that kind of thing. I've been looking at the report. Very good strategies there about north, south. We've got the timing is done around, you've actually looked at the number of trees and all that. I could argue, couldn't I? Because I'm at a certain place in the list, so let's have a go at that. I think I was concerned that there's an issue about how many trees there are. Now, if you look on Park Road, seems to be coming in for slating tonight. Other than the top of Park Road, there are no trees on that road. But yet, come autumn, you're going to be knee-deep in leaves. Why? Well, because if you're on private land and you have leaf fall from anywhere, the leaves are the responsibility of the land they fall on. That's English case law for hundreds of years. You can't go chasing the wind. But it works two ways, because every house all the way down has got huge trees which drop their leaf fall onto the pavement there. The pavement's quite narrow, actually, so there are no street trees. I would be really interested in looking not at what that list would look like if you did it on the number of trees on Rob Reed's list in the tree department, but on the tonnage you collect after doing, because I think you do it ward by ward. We get that nice email. Is it from Heather? Is it from yeah, thank you. And it says what you've done each week. Oh, next week we're in Flixton. Da, da, da. So we probably have a rough idea ward by ward the tonnage we're collecting. Does that mirror the number of trees that Rob Reed has, or is it different because you've got a school with a load of trees, you've got private trees that dump their leaves on? And I wonder if that would change the order we did it. Do you see what I mean? Just a thought.
I do. And John's now going to be dying to answer this one.
Thanks, Councillor Fraston. The order of trees was just an indication of the scale. It does not dictate the route. You're right in saying there is a reference to what you're saying there, in the sense of there are a number of private trees that fall onto the highway that are not necessarily registered in the tree units. So from that perspective, it doesn't really that number of trees doesn't direct how the route formed. We start north and south at the same time. They start without the lighter part of the canopy, which is in October. The reasons being for that is because of the scale of the operation. We bring in machines more than what we've got on a regular basis, so we hire in machines. So it starts off the cycle so that it's able to start in a continuity. It starts to gain momentum, so it starts off on the lighter side of the canopy, and then it starts to hit the bigger side of the canopy as it moves through. That's mainly what dictates the route. And the reason for that is by the time you get to the bigger side of the canopy, you're talking November, December, cold snap, the whole canopy drops. And that's what then really is the intensity of the service.
I just wondered if that canopy, though, how do we know that if it's not? Because that canopy is a mix of public and private, but it all falls on the road. So how do we know what the route is? Do you know what I mean?
It's a good question in the sense of how do we know that? Well, we've got employees that have been here a long time. So from it's not necessarily all historical. We do adapt, and we also have within that larger scale operation, we have a reactor team that either go to residential homes, schools, or something else that's causing issues or problems. So the main drive is not disrupted. So it's mainly built on history over us knowing the wards.
Councillor Axford.
Yeah, I just wondered if we were doing anything yet about encouraging residents not to pave over their gardens and having more kind of green surface areas. And following on from what we just talked about, the leaf clearance seems really, really important in view of drainage and gullies and everything. And yeah, I don't know, I just thought you know that. Sorry, I'm tired. Thank you.
But does the paving of gardens sit with highways?
Not really. No. It is unfortunately. I couldn't agree more. To be honest, I wish they wouldn't. I think going back to kind of just a kind of associated thing. We do, as the Highways Department, try and influence what planning do in terms of what they do. So if they in terms of the materials used, in terms of what we're doing with trees, we are linked in to each other. So what we try and do is to get the most cost-effective way forward. Your comment, Councillor Frass, about the Chinese granite, I couldn't agree more about putting in various things like that. I would much rather see flexible services that I can maintain easily. And when it comes to things that affect what we do in terms of extra services, then obviously we would like some influence in that. We don't always get that choice though, unfortunately. So we have to react to what we're given. The leaf clearance programme, the last 3 to 4 years. We know it doesn't tick every box for everybody, and the major issue there is, as John said, once the first frost hits for more than a couple of nights, and we get storm PQRST, whichever one arrives around that time of year, then that unfortunately is the main catalyst for the reaction of what we do. And unfortunately, it never happens on the first day of the tree season. So there's always a lag within that bit, and with the resources that we got, which we double up, we double the amount of large mechs that we have on available to John and Martin who deal with it. It still means that we can't get everywhere at once, unfortunately, and that's just unfortunately a fact of life at the moment.
Just very quickly, just to very fast to add to that one. Of course, what also happens as well, of course, is that it's when we get the frosts and then suddenly can't do the leaf clearance because the leaves are frozen, so they can't do them. So it was a problem. Obviously, in this winter, we actually had all the floods and the heavy rains, followed by a lot of frost. So all those works really did backlog the clearance programme. So they are getting there now, and obviously I think it's just doing a few bits of minor sweeps as John mentioned. Well, it mentioned to me, the sense of it. So that scheme is finished, but it's actually doing the snagging work now, and that's where it's up. So, but if there are problems in your ward, please do report them. You know, I mean, that's what it's there for. If you think something's been missed, etc., that then off that snagging list, that then do get it in. That's important.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, can I just briefly say, but in the paving over gardens, really, it kind of goes back to my original question as well. I asked at the beginning. It was about having a joined-up approach, and I could see that you do kind of have one, but it's just like making sure that everything is really interconnected. Thank you.
I think we try our best with that. We've moved on. I feel we've moved on in terms of connections between Green Space team and also trees, but also the highways teams, both operational, capital, revenue, and so on. The relationships between, as part of the One Trafford partnership, both the client team and Amy's colleagues, we're now trying to make sure that we get people in the right places in the right room. Yep. I think anybody who's been to the depot can see that it is a big open plan office. We make sure, we try and make sure that within the bounds of human possibility, we talk to each other as much as we can. We sometimes fail, but we try and do our best to make sure that we've got as joined up a service as we can. Yes, can do. By the way, the invitation is open every 2 months. I do hold an open morning for people. We try and move it from Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, which is the usual bit. But anybody who wants to come along and see what we do, then you can come and meet whoever you want in the depot. You can walk, ask whatever you want, wander wherever you want, with an orange jacket on if it's in the wrong area, and see just exactly what we do, what we do as a partnership, and that invitation is open to every member.
I was just going to add probably a good recommendation if we can have some kind of yearly or biannually visit to different sites that you're either like filling in potholes or clearing, you know, just so we can see like on the job as well. We've done that with the police, I've done it with the CCTV team, and I think it is really helpful for councillors to be able to like physically see what you're doing. So any like bigger projects you have that are scheduled in, it would be great to go and see some of those, as well as like the, you know, the general works as well.
Invitations to anything that we do. We are finishing off the active travel scheme on the A56, so we'll have to be quite sharpish to that one, because we will be finished by the 31st of March. But we do have other projects like the Phase 6 top of Seymour Grove elements of the work. Anybody who wants to come, we will get you the PPE.
Can I just add into that? Obviously, being clear and transparent of letting you see things. If you want to come and see something, some of the black magic that our colleagues do here on the computer systems and stuff like that, by all means, we'll run through it with you. We'll show the systems. I know when you do visit, there's a lot going on around that. If you want to ask in advance, you want to look at a particular thing, give us a heads up, make sure we've got the right people in the office.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your answers today. They were very thorough. And thanks for the questions, everybody. Next up, we have safety of roads and pavements in the borough. I know some questions have probably like overlapped. I'm not expecting a huge amount of questions, as big an amount anyway as the last item, but we are open for questions for the officers on that one. Does anyone have Councillor Coggins?
Thanks. I had a few different issues. I wanted to start maybe with the page 50, targeted delivery and programs. So stuff you're doing really to reduce crashes. I suppose cycle training at year 6, presenting year 6 how to improve road awareness, school streets. It struck me reading it that other than perhaps the last 2 vehicle activated messages and in some cases TRO rollout, but most of this is aimed actually at the victims of road violence, the pedestrians and the cyclists, trying to teach them how to modify their behaviour rather than actually, you know, we know that in most cases it's the driver who's responsible. So I just wonder, is there anything more can be done in terms of driver behaviour?
On a wider level, Greater Manchester we're involved heavily in all these sort of aspects of these initiatives that go on. So that is about driver behaviour and educating the driver. So that does exist.
The Safer Roads Partnership,
yes,
for instance. So a lot of the driver awareness courses, for instance, are funded through the Road Safety Partnership, through fine, you know, instead of taking a fine, you can opt to take a road safety course. So, and there's lots of campaigns and publicity put out by the Road Safety Partnership across the whole of Greater Manchester, which Trafford is kind of supports those initiatives. So, yeah, many of those softer kind of measures, as we like to call them, are regional wide rather than targeted in Trafford. But you did mention some of those schemes, like even traffic regulation orders are there to educate drivers and to encourage them not to park in unsafe locations and places where they cause access issues. So I guess it's choices and where the council puts the funding. Is it specifically at casualty areas? And Trafford has got Greater Manchester's got quite a relatively good casualty record. You know, I know that you ask the members of the public and they think, oh, that's not quite true, but statistically, collisions are coming down. And Greater Manchester do have the Vision Zero programme that's now coming into force, so we will be putting in bids for further external funding towards areas where we can sort of identify and justify actions on collision grounds. But it's like Chris has been saying all night, really, it's choices and trying to put the money where it is most effective to target the issues that we can identify.
The Vision Zero campaign that has been run by TFG, and we're expecting elements of funding for that, which we will push through, and some of that will be part of the CRSTS1 money, hopefully, that we get through in the near future. So we'll be able to give a bit of an update on that.
Any other questions? Go on, Councillor Coggins.
Well, I have quite a lot of questions. I mean, I do think we don't give enough attention to this, considering the amount of attention we give to. I mean, this report tells us that 60 people were killed or had serious injuries from crashes in Trafford in the last year that we have data from, and we've given quite a lot of attention to potholes. I do think we should add some more questions here. And what we don't have here is a breakdown. I was interested in a breakdown of where the crashes happened. So what proportion of this is the A56? I think one of the statistics here told us this includes the motorway. I don't know if all of them include the motorway. How much of this is the A56? How much of it is, say, on a pavement? How much of it is the ABC roads versus the U roads? I didn't really feel I had all the info that I was hoping for.
I think that's a good point. We can get some of that information, and I'm fairly sure we can put that on the map without any problem. I don't think you'll find any surprises. I think a lot of the clustering will be on the A's and B's B roads. But what we will do is we'll take an action to see if we can give you something graphically.
Thank you. Councillor Frass?
Yeah, actually, just on that point, prompted by what Councillor Coggins was saying, we've got the Trafford Data Lab. I think I raised this with Councillor Patel, maybe, an executive about, before Christmas. If you go on your Trafford Data Lab, with all the dashboards and that, people know what, I think I'm using the right name for it. If you go onto the road accidents one, nothing since COVID, 2020, 2021. So you can't plot. It's a really, I'm not doing it down, it's a wonderful, it's graphical, it's brightly coloured, it's really good, but it's not been updated in yonks. So yeah, actually just thought of it now, might be an action point to take away and keep pushing to get all that in there.
Can I just intervene there? There is an issue between the link on TFGN systems and the internal IT systems. So it's something that's in hand, people are aware of, it's just getting it through that system. Joining the dots, basically, yeah, there's an element in that.
It's a really good resource.
Yeah.
Well, we'll definitely we'll have a look at that. To be honest, if it's a good resource and there's an IT link, then let's sort the IT link.
Fab. Any more questions, Councillor Collins?
So just more data that I wanted really. The list of collisions, so 174 there on the last year on page 44. They go up and down, so they've gone up from 100 in the data we have. 323 is the highest year, 161 is the lowest year, but we don't have any analysis, so I'm wondering what's happening there. Is this random clustering? Is this just the normal up and down? Is there a trend? I can't see a trend in the 8 years we have in front of us. Is it some kind of weird weather events that have caused particular clusters? Was there a year when there was a bus crash or something? And in fact, no, this is a number of collisions, I think, rather than number of injuries. So again, I suppose we've got some raw data here, but what we really want is to know what's really going on behind the data. If we don't have that information, is anyone looking into it? Does anyone say, why did we have 323 road injury collisions in 2017 when there was only 195 the previous year? Is that research being done?
What sort of collisions? Sorry, Councillor Collins. 323, all collisions, did you say?
Page 44 of the pack, we have the total number of road injury collisions by year in a purple bar graph.
Yeah, it's that one.
Right. Sorry, I don't have to present it. I was expecting it was going to be presented, but it's not, is it?
Yeah. Well, to be fair, it does show a pretty clear downward trend in there. Are we from 323 down to 174 with a lump of COVID in the middle? But to be fair, no, we've not done massive amounts of research into it. But what have we done?
I was going to say, statistically, with relatively low numbers, you're going to get a fluctuation over the borough through a 5-year period, and COVID, as you say, is another influence on there. There could be different scenarios, weather patterns, etc., in particular years. It's something that we kind of monitor in a more general sense rather than look at specific years, because they could vary from year to year. So we're looking at the overall trends and the types of collisions and the cluster areas where they take place to target those. And it obviously all relates back to what funding is available. But there are, like we said earlier, TFGM and the road casualty unit, they look at those kinds of statistics more than we're able to, and target their campaigns. So you'll have like young driver campaigns or drug driving campaigns, targeted at the data that they are analysing across the whole region to give more of a statistical weight to what they're trying to do. Many of our sort of collision cluster sites, if you like, don't exist anymore. They're scattered around, so it's more difficult to actually target a particular type of collision at a particular location, because the numbers are not there to back up doing anything statistically. So, and similarly for the different types of collision, pedestrian collisions, they're scattered throughout the road network now, not just in Trafford but elsewhere. So actually prioritising a particular cluster is quite difficult these days, and therefore addressing traffic calming, is the same sort of. You've got to justify spending that element of money is targeting particular accidents, and they're more scattered around the network rather than in particular roads or areas.
Sorry.
No, go on.
So I was going to add, when I was sitting on TFGM, they actually had a special pot of money which was developed from when drivers opt to actually go on these courses, still pay that fine and so forth. And that goes into the Greater Manchester Partnership. Some of it goes in those training courses that Keith mentioned, but what also was, there was another pot of money that was particularly safety schemes. And we had one done in Stretford, around 7 Ways a few years ago, you might remember. And before that scheme was put in, obviously there was a lot of pedestrian casualties there. And obviously that was highlighted at those meetings there. And they did do one of these special schemes around there. And obviously, since they implemented that scheme around there, it was around the bus stops and so forth, and it's actually reduced the number of lanes around the junction. And as a consequence of that, there's not been any accidents since around there. So it's actually been, that scheme was held up as quite a model around that scheme, and it's actually had a real effect on pedestrian injuries around that junction around there. So it's those sort of schemes that we can do, and obviously, in any one year, if you actually had several pedestrian injuries around that one junction, all of a sudden you make that improvement. So you can see the drop there. I mean, looking at the figures there, predominantly it is on a downward trend in that sense. So that's positive, but we need to do more. But it's those sort of schemes that we can do. So working with TFGM and others, we can target particular areas where we find them. Hope that's helpful.
Can I make a suggestion? I think with TFGM do have a centralised analytics department who look at this, and I'm fairly sure they do have a breakdown of this. So I think whereas we will look at it on probably a more general basis, we are spending not very much, unfortunately, on kind of defeating this. I think we went over that particular point early doors, really within this. But I think what we can do is we can talk to the Vision Zero team, and we can see see if they've got any information that is specific to Trafford that sets it out. So we'll take that action away.
Can I just say briefly as well, I was interested in how you're defining severe and slight casualties as well, because it seems a bit kind of, well, any casualty is a casualty, isn't it? It has enormous psychological impact on someone if there's a collision, so it's like, it does feel like it's a bit vague, but I understand why. But with Vision Zero, there'll be more data, surely, anyway. Yeah, thank you.
They've got the resources to deal with as we see on a daily basis when we meet them. But there is there's no doubt that what we want to do is to minimise the amount of these that we can do. and we utilise any information that we can do to do it. And one of the things is the information from you as councillors, really. So it goes back to the original point that was made to Councillor Hartley's point. You know, that if there are areas of concern, we were out with the leader and a couple of councillors the other day round the corner. Around the corner in Stratford, having a look at a particular accident spot. So we do treat this extremely seriously.
Thank you, Councillor Frass.
Yeah, just another quick thought. All these great graphs here, tracking things by age, by we do it by location. Is it possible, or is it relevant? I don't know how long's a piece of string. Is it worth looking at what's caused the accident? So is it vision? Is it sunlight? They were dazzled? Is it that there was a vehicle fault? Is it drunk driving? If we knew that could be quite something you take. But unless I've missed it, just again, it occurred to me. I was just scrolling up and I couldn't see that. We don't track that. We track it all other ways, but not what the original cause is. Would that be useful to know, I wonder? And could we do something with that? But it's not here.
Yeah, Councillor, there is. Sorry. Yeah, very good question. In each recorded injury accident, there are a number of individual criteria that are assessed that are a causation factor. So what we can probably do, Keith, is we'll just get an example injury accident that shows you the headlines. And going back to your earlier point about the data map, there is a crash map system that you can access. It's pretty much the same thing with a different. So what I'll do is I'll get the link and share it. I think you have to put your email address in and join it, but then you can get the information. I checked it recently because I couldn't get on something else. When I checked the information that Keith has direct access to in the office, it was exactly the same. So we can certainly circulate that. But there are causation factors that the police put down. Regularly, I'll tell you now, regularly driver error is the number one. But alcohol, drugs, all that sort of stuff. Was the road wet? Those are all issues that are looked at.
Go on, Councillor Coggins.
Can I suggest that we look at this at a future meeting, because I feel like there's a lot more content to be looked into here.
I think we'll be discussing the work programme in July, and I think it's definitely something that we consider, yeah. I think would be a good item for earlier on in the agenda. And
Sorry, Chair. I think I'd agree, and I think you've given us a really good steer on some of the granularity of information that we would go. We'd probably also invite someone from TFGM to come along to kind of have a look at that, and I'm sure they'd be willing to do so.
Thank you very much. Has anyone got any final questions there? No? Well, thank you very much to our officers. You're all welcome to leave, but we really appreciate you all coming tonight, and thanks for all your thorough answers, and I'm sure we'll have some more questions for you in future. Thank you. Right, so last but not least, we have the any other business and agenda item. There was something that I wanted to bring up today, which was the option to have a task and finish group this side of the municipal year. So essentially the municipal year will end in May, but we don't have elections this year. But the next scrutiny meeting in the new municipal year will be July. So we can either decide to choose a topic tonight or wait till July. Does anyone have any burning preference either way?
I think really it should be July, shouldn't it? Because we'll have new members on the committee, so...
Yeah, I'm happy to defer it till July. We could have complete new members.
We will. I don't know about you. Yeah.
But task and finishes are wider than just this committee. But yeah, I'm open to either. I think it could be appropriate to wait till July. Yeah, everyone in agreement on that? Yeah. So if anyone has any topics that they want to throw in the ring for consideration, please do feel free. Have a think about what you would like to put on the work programme, like whether you want to stay on this committee or not. We're happy to hear your suggestions for those to build what we do next year. We have a date for the diary, which is the annual scrutiny review on the 9th of April. That will be an in-person meeting, and the invite will go out for that later in the week from John Addison. And last but not least, I'd like to thank you all for participating, and also a huge thanks to Harry for all the support that he's given us this year. He's an absolutely wonderful officer, and we're really lucky to have him on Scrutiny, so thank you, Harry. Right, that's it. Thanks, everyone.